How's it going, everybody? We're here again for another Artisans of Steel podcast. Thank you for joining me. I'm excited for this conversation. Today, we're talking to Ben Tendick. He's a good friend of mine and a very talented maker. And I'm really excited to kind of pick his brain and learn more about his story and his background and his successes and maybe some of his failures. He's willing to share those with us. But before we get into that, I'm going to talk about our super sponsors this month. If you want to become a super sponsor or a member of the Patreon, you can go to patreon.com and just look up Malmasi Fire Arts. I also have a link in my Instagram bio that goes to a link tree, and I think the Patreon is one of the top links in that link tree. And so, with that said, our first sponsor is Mr. Lawrence Lake. He's Maritime Knife Supply on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Maritime Knife Supply. You can also find him online at maritimeknifesupply.com, where you can literally get anything you need for knife making, from consumables like belts and handle materials and stuff like that, and bolts to steel to machines to large tools like anvils and otherwise. If there's something he's not carrying that you would like, you can ask him about it. Because for whatever reason it might be difficult to find on the website or whatever, or you might be having a hard time finding it on the website. Anyways, he can help you get a hold of it. If he doesn't carry it, you're probably not the only one that needs that stuff. So he will probably figure out a way to source it, and then he can get it to you. So just talk to him. But yeah, go check out our friend Lawrence Lake over at Maritime Knife Supply on Instagram and maritimeknifesupply.com. Next up, we have Gabe Fletcher. He's Anchorage Brewing on Instagram. His maker page is Anchorage Forge. Gabe has been doing phenomenal work over the last couple of years. Really skyrocketed. He's doing some really great collaborations. He's actually working on a slew of knives for Blade Show. So if you're going to Blade Show in Atlanta at the beginning of June, you're going to see a lot of really cool work. His Damascus is phenomenal, and he's just doing all kinds of really fun, exciting things, and I'm proud of him. I'm thankful to be part of his journey, and it's really cool to watch him kind of develop and continue to expand on his knowledge and skills and his breadth of work, and kind of starting to really come up with his own stuff that's really cool and functional. And so go check out Gabe Fletcher for his brewing page, Anchorage Brewing, as well as at Anchorage Forge on Instagram. Excuse me. Okay. Next up, we have Josh Weston. He's on Instagram at Josh A. Weston, all one word. He's also the owner operator of at Dragon Forge EXP. That's the Dragon Forge experience, where they have, I think, at least right now, they have 3 semi-permanent or permanent locations around the country at various Renaissance festivals, and they build these forges that are like dragons, and so you're forging out of the mouth of a dragon. It's really phenomenal. It's super cool, and I'm actually looking forward to. I've been talking to Josh about, I think, later this fall, going down either to, I think it's the Texas one, Renaissance Festival, and going and working a couple weekends down there. I think that would be a lot of fun in kind of like the November time, just before Christmas kind of stuff. Also, Josh is just in general a really great guy, super creative, graphic designer by trade, and he's also, he's just great to know and follow on Instagram. So again, go follow his personal page for his knife making is Josh A. Weston, and then his Dragon Forge experience, which you can see all the different stuff and where they're going to be and all the things they're doing, is Dragon Forge EXP. And both of those are all one word. All right, next up is Russell Tinsley. He's at Can't Make Knives, as well as at Ouzelfinch Beers. Ouzelfinch Beers they're based out of Virginia, and they make wildly out of the box flavored beers. One of the things I've really been enjoying from them is the boozy sodas that they make. So if you think about like the kind of like the generic brand, I think for me, where I grew up, was Western Family was the generic brand, but it was like grape soda, orange soda, strawberry soda, all these different sodas. So I have this, like, there's this nostalgia around those kind of sodas, but these are grown up versions of those sodas, so they do have alcohol in them. So be careful around those kiddos. But yeah, the Ouzel Finch boozy sodas are super good. Go check them out for all kinds of other beer releases they got going on. And if you're in Virginia, go to their tap room. I understand it's at like an old, like decommissioned fort. It's a really interesting place and location. They got all kinds of events going on all the time. So go check them out at Ouzel Finch Beers. That's OOZLE Finch Beers. And again, Russell's maker page is at Can't Make Knives. Lastly, we have Dan Hubbs. He's 6'6" Mountain Knives on Instagram and Facebook at the numbers 6'6" Mountain Knives, all one word. Dan is a great guy. I'm looking forward to seeing him again, actually, at Blade Show. I'm hoping this year that he's going to submit some work into the best Damascus, because his Damascus finishes are absolutely phenomenal, and he does a really great job with them. And he's also making some really cool Damascus patterns. He has been just like a really great supportive guy. He came and took a class. He's been a member of the Patreon and a super sponsor for a while. I'm just really thankful to him, and I look forward to seeing him, and hopefully he gets an award at that Blade Show, because again, his stuff is really great. He's also been doing a lot of really kind of like demonstrative kind of work, showing some of his processes on his Instagram, which is worth the follow. Again, it's at 6'6" Mountain Knives. And with that, we are on to the conversation. I'm noticing Ben's in the green room right now, and his camera's sideways. I don't know if he's got window lock or whatever. His camera's sideways. But anyways, I'm gonna pull him in here. Ben is a really great guy. I've been very thankful to him last couple of years when I go down to the Eugene knife show. Him and his family are super just like really kind and open to letting us come and hang out. Our kids are of similar ages. I think Simon's at least a couple of years older than Victor, but those guys are just attached at the hip basically the whole time when they're hanging out that weekend. But your work, I've admired your work for quite a long time. I think actually even before we first met at the Eugene Knife Show, like 2014, I think was the first time we went to the Eugene. Yeah, so like 11 years ago. Your grinds, you're a stock removal maker. You do some forging,
Yeah, a little bit.
but predominantly you're a stock removal maker, and your grinds are so clean, and I really love your plunges on your knives. And I remember asking you actually a long time ago, I was like, how do you do that? And I think you were kind, but at the same time, you're like, if you want to know, the information's out there. Just got to do it for it.
That doesn't sound like
Which is
me.
it was totally fair. So I was like, damn it, you know what? You're right. It is out there. I just gotta
I
stop being lazy.
probably didn't know you well enough to be like, come in the shop and I'll show you.
No, yeah, I think we had just met.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, but I don't know. I think there's always this back and forth about forging versus stock removal. Which one's better? Which one's worse? I think they both have their place. Forging is a little trickier because you really got to know what you're doing and what's happening in the material. A lot of people think, oh, I just get this fancy steel and I forge it and it makes it even better. But it's like all that extra heat does funky stuff to the steel. And if you don't know what you're doing or how to process it afterwards, that's probably not going to benefit actually the blade very well.
right.
And honestly, like I got my start working for Bob Creamer doing stock removal work. And the reason I feel so confident and I guess good at blade grinding was literally just grinding out blades, like hundreds
Right.
of blades for him over the years that I worked for him. And I think honestly, like a well ground blade with a proper heat treat is way more functional of a tool than anything that might have been forged, especially if the forger doesn't necessarily know all the metallurgical stuff that they need to truly understand, especially if they're working with more complex alloyed steels, and how that forging affects it. But so that all that to say, I'm a big fan of stock removal knives, and anybody who isn't, they need to check themselves. And
Yeah,
so I
that's
just appreciate you coming in
definitely
and
a
being on the
good
show.
place to start for people. I mean, you're cutting
Yeah,
out a lot of variables.
Right.
not messing with at least a good factory anneal and maybe a grain refinement on the steel that you're getting. So
For sure.
it's like you said, it's way easier to ruin a knife forging than it is to make it better. I've definitely
Right.
ruined more knives forging the probably, 2 dozen times I've forged knives than I have in the 15 years I've been doing stock removal knives. Like,
For sure.
usually stock removal, you can save it, like make the blade longer, but when you crumble a blade into large granules of sugar on your floor, you overheated it and tried to forge it or whatever, like
Yeah.
it's pretty much gone. Like,
Yeah.
and
The second
sometimes
it's
you don't even know that's what the grain looks like, and you make a knife, and
yeah.
so
Oh gosh. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I have thankfully, but unfortunately, but also thankfully, learned that lesson the hard way by
yeah,
well, I think the first time it happened was with Damasteel. I had
yeah,
like 4 cubic inches or so of Damasteel. And Damasteel, I think at the time was still like 100, at least 100, maybe $120 a cubic inch. So that
right,
was like
yeah,
$400 to $500 worth of material.
right,
I didn't understand that stuff about especially high carbon, higher alloyed steels. And I
right.
pull it out to start smushing on it and forging it like I would normally. And it just turned into kinetic sand. Like all the like
Yeah,
you said, it looks
100%.
like brown sugar. Like
Yeah,
you plop it out of a measuring cup and then you push on it and just like
yeah,
it just crumbled. Yeah, same thing.
yeah.
And I was like,
Whoa.
"Oh, what happened?" No, well, that's not good.
Yeah,
I did that I think 3 times. So, yeah, I burned through like 12 to $1,500 worth of material pretty quickly,
right,
learning that lesson the hard way. But I've also done that with uh like Crew Forge V. And
right,
I swear I was working in the proper temperatures, but if I pulled it out to like crush it down and start upsetting the bolster and stuff, and it just started tearing. I was like, "Oops, something
right.
happened
You
here."
only got a couple hundred degrees to work with that stuff, and
Yeah,
kind of hard to do.
yeah, yeah.
I've done a
Well,
little bit of forging with 3V, doing some 3V San Mai, and had a little bit of six, probably 50-50 success. I mean, I know some
oh
guys
yeah,
like Ian Rogers is doing that kind of stuff. Like, I imagine he's ripped a few blades, but like, I'm like, yeah, that's not something I'm going to be doing all the
yeah,
time to make a living. It's just, and that's 3V's expensive, but not like
right,
Damasteel expensive, but still the
yeah,
time investment and getting a billet put together and surface ground, and like,
yeah.
it's not something you want to repeat a bunch of times when you're trying to
No,
make a living.
yeah, um, yeah. And Ian, I think Ian refers to it as knife maker's tuition. Whenever he chalks it up. And
Right.
hopefully you're paying attention, kids, and you learn
Yeah.
from these mistakes because
The
they
price
can
of
be
it.
expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, price of admission for
Yeah.
sure. Well, I wanna start back back it up a little bit with little baby Ben
Oh.
and and, like, what were you like as a kid, and how did that kinda lead into, like, high school and then what you did for work after high school? And then I guess eventually how that transitioned into knife making.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always, at least as long as I can remember, maybe back to when I was 9 or 10, like I've always made stuff out of other
Sure.
stuff,
Yeah.
like stuff for my GI Joes, and cardboard airplanes, or taking
Yeah.
my bike apart, whatever it is, salvaging material from different things to make other stuff. So I've always liked. My brother used to always make fun of me. Oh, Ben can make it, like, because
Oh, yeah.
I'd always used to say like, oh, I can make that, even if I couldn't. It's just like my mindset, like, oh, I bet I could make that. So, but that kind of, I think the first knife I made was a clip off of an old wooden ladder I found down in the woods, like a
Oh,
metal bracket.
yeah.
And I hammered it on the asphalt with like a claw hammer, and then scraped it on the asphalt back. And it wasn't really a knife, but I thought it was a knife, like
It's like a
scraping
prison
back
shiv.
and forth on the, 18 grit asphalt surface
Yeah.
out in front of my house. Um, but yeah, just always making stuff. And then My first job, I actually worked at a ski resort up Willamette Pass. Like my
Okay.
first real job. I did a lot of construction. Like there was different contractors and stuff I worked for, just doing like building decks and doing roofs and
Sure.
stuff.
I got
Um,
you.
and I was homeschooled actually. Forgot to mention that. So I was homeschooled. So like I'd get out of school, you know, pretty early and go do jobs and stuff. And yeah, so I've always liked working with my hands. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody likes doing a roof in 100-degree weather in the middle of summer. Like I don't know if any of you have ever done that, but like
I did that once, and I foolishly didn't wear a shirt because I was like, "It's
oh
hot,"
yeah.
and I got roasted. I looked like a lobster. It was so painful.
Yeah,
It was terrible.
speaking of no shirt at the ski resort, it was like what they
Oh,
call a bluebird day, you know, nice and
sure.
sunny. I was working, I usually ran a ski lift, but I was working the tubing hill. There's like
Okay.
nobody there. It was probably like a Tuesday. Nobody there. I'm like, this is really nice. You know, it's warm. So I got like shorts and no shirt on, and we're like all tubing for 4 to 6 hours. The worst sunburn of my entire life.
And it
Like
was
I was
probably
like,
all
oh
over
yeah,
because the
and
reflective
then the
sun.
next day it was like 20 degrees, so I had to have all my gear back on, and so like climbing up and
Oh,
down
geez.
ladders, like, it was a terrible decision for an 18-year-old to make. But yeah,
Right. How so you said you were homeschooled. I'm curious
yeah,
how how did your parents kind of manage you taking things apart all the time? Because I remember I did kind of a similar thing. I was kind of a tinkerer, and I was always taking things apart, often without telling people, and then I'd put it back
right,
together, and sometimes most of the time they would work, sometimes they didn't, and so
yeah.
but I'm curious how your parents kinda received that and worked with you on that, and maybe helped to cultivate that inside of you.
I mean, most of the time I wasn't taking too many things apart. I was just building things.
Okay.
So like my grandpa, he died when I was really young, but
Mm,
he was a cabinet maker. And so my dad had like boxes and boxes of screws and like wood and all kinds of stuff laying around. And he worked a lot of hours, so he wasn't home a lot. And so
okay.
my favorite thing when I was a kid was a cardboard box full of 16 penny nails in the shop that I would just like grab handfuls of and grab some scrap wood. And like
Yeah.
we lived up Oak Ridge. Nobody knows where that is, but it's up like surrounded by Willamette National Forest. So there's like
Okay.
just tons of woods, like trails. They do like mountain bike festivals and stuff up there. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, just go down in the woods and build a fort and stuff. And I was pretty good at like salvaging stuff. So I didn't
Sure.
take apart most stuff, but like if there's an old pair of boots that got thrown in the garbage, I'd be cutting the leather out of it, you know, to make
Oh,
stuff out of it and that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd take like bikes apart and that kind of stuff and put them back together. And but yeah,
So your
check
parents would help you
on it.
your parents would help you with, like, supplies or get you like 16 penny nails or
Well,
help to
they just had like my dad
they
just
just
had all that stuff
okay.
from his dad, kind of. So
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Scrap it. And
what did your parents do when you were growing up?
my dad worked for a sand and gravel company. Well, he was a logger initially, like when I was really young,
Okay,
and then he did lots of different like road building and stuff like that for Oak Ridge Sand and Gravel up there. So yeah, my mom homeschooled us, so she was a stay at
yeah.
home mom, and yeah, yeah.
She
But
ran
yeah,
the
we grew
household.
up in the woods, man. So we were on our bikes and walking trails and building stuff, and yeah, it was a
Sure.
fishing in the creek, and yeah, it was a good time. It was cool. It was cool to have that kind of childhood.
Yeah, how many siblings did you have?
I have three siblings.
Oh,
Yeah, an older brother, a younger brother, and a younger sister.
I got you.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So you're like a semi-middle child. How does
Yeah,
that play
semi
out
middle
as a dynamic?
child, and then like once my brother left, I was kind of transitioned to being. I mean, I was always had the
Oh,
oldest mindset. Like
okay.
I was always like 35 years old and in charge. Is kind of. I'm sure my sibling. I know my siblings hated that, you know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I've kind of always been an old man. at heart, which works out now that I'm turning into an old man. So
Perfect. Your Benjamin Button moment's happening.
right,
You're
yeah,
coming into your own.
I'm here. I have arrived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, when how did you get first introduced to knives? Was that through your dad or
No,
somebody
I
else?
mean, I had like little pocket knives when I was a kid.
Sure.
Just typical. I'd have a pocket knife. We'd go fishing, gut fish, that kind of stuff. But they were never anything more than just like a utility item or something cool from a movie. It really wasn't until probably a lot later. I want to say like 2000. I think my first really nice knife was like a Kershaw Blur. Like I
Okay.
spent like $70 on it at Weimar, and I was like, it's assisted open, so it's like a switchblade, and I'm like, this is really nice.
Yeah.
And that was probably in like 2006.
Okay.
But it wasn't until probably 2009 that I kind of, it might have been earlier than that, because I started seeing like RMJ Tacticals, Tomahawks and stuff. That kind of came,
Okay.
I think they had like an OPB special talking about, I don't know if you've seen that special. It's pretty cool.
Mm-mm.
But talking about like the drop forging process and making those axes and,
Oh, okay.
their
Yeah.
involvement in getting those into military hands and stuff at the time. But yeah, like 2009, I kind of came to it from a weird way. I like got into making bows, like bow and arrow stuff.
Oh, really?
And
Like,
a lot of those
okay.
sites that I was on, there was some traditional knife makers on as well. And so
Yeah.
I was making bows, trying to make bows, which turns out is a lot more complex than knife making, with a lot more room for failure. Like stuff
Sure.
explodes. Like you get all the ways down, you're like, well, it just snapped in half, and I don't know why. So I'll just start over. But yeah, I got on sites like Trad Gang is a archery website,
Okay.
but there was people like Carl Anderson. I think Lynn Ray
Oh,
was on there.
yeah.
Um, Carl Anderson was, because he's a big archer as well, and so he was a big like kind of probably one of my first influences seeing like an actual custom knife and like his Damascus and his takedowns and his San Mai and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then on another website was Paleo Planet, which was kind of like there's a traditional archery slash paleo type arts and different stuff. And there's a knife maker section on there. Um, and a bunch of hobbyist knife makers, and James Helm was the other one on there.
Okay.
And so I kind of saw his stuff, and his stuff's very forged to shape, traditional, a lot of wrapped handles, and he was doing a lot of like socketed handles at the time.
Okay.
uh, but that was kind of my first introduction of the world, like of cut, like really custom knives. Like I didn't even know that was a thing.
Sure. Interesting.
Like I hadn't seen Blade magazine or anything like that. So, other than what you see in movies, Rambo knives and Highlander with the swords, that kind of stuff. Like that was my first time like, oh, this is a thing. Like people still make knives by hand, and there's
Right.
like this broad spectrum of ways to do it. And yeah.
For sure. So real quick, do you have a click pen or like a
I mean, maybe. Is it loud?
I can hear it. Yeah. At first I thought you had like some like assisted opener. You're just flicking
No, it's a
open.
click pin.
Okay. Um interesting. So it's through making bows and archery. Have you been has archery been part of your life like most all your life or
No, like I got into it probably after I graduated. I think we went to like something that Bowtech had put on, like do it, and they had compound bows and stuff. And so we bow hunted for a couple years pretty unsuccessfully.
okay.
And so it was, kind of in the background and interest of mine. And like I said, I've always built stuff or tried to build stuff. And so I've kind of always had a hobby that I full-heartedly like dove headfirst into. Like, I'm going to be
Sure.
a bow maker, and just like pour everything into that, and so I was doing that. No, I don't still do it. I still enjoy archery. Again, I'm not very good at it, but it's fun, anymore. I like have a couple longbows and recurve bows and fling some arrows in my backyard and stuff. But
Sure.
it's for fun,
Yeah. What do you use as a background so you're not shooting into your neighbor's yards?
My chickens.
Your chickens at the day.
No,
Moving
our
target.
our yard's long enough that, and it's a compound bow. I'd be more worried about it, but I'm back
Sure.
far enough, and I'm shooting kind of at a target on the ground. So
I got
usually
you. So
I
you're probably
lose it
shooting like,
the ground behind it.
yeah, so you're shooting like maybe 20 meters,
Yeah,
15,
yeah,
20 meters. Yeah.
yeah. Yards. This is
Yards.
America, but
Sorry. At the archery ranges ranges I've been to, they do meters.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
That's
yeah,
a shooting thing. You're
yeah.
right.
Um, I mean, last I was aware, Cameron Haynes. Are you familiar with Cameron Haynes?
He lives in Eugene here, pretty close to me here. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever had any interactions with him?
I haven't met him. We haven't really crossed paths. I mean, I see a lot of his stuff he does. He's pretty
He's a pretty
busy
active hunter.
here. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like he would be a good tester, or not tester, but just like
right,
a good person to get. I mean, obviously there's a lot of avid hunters, I'm sure, down there.
right.
Um, yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah,
He's an archer. He
yeah,
does all like archery hunting.
yeah.
He is,
Like hardcore.
yeah,
Yeah,
shockingly talented
right.
archer.
Yeah,
And yeah, and his if people haven't seen his posts or his Instagram feed, it's wild. Like he's
yeah,
rucking out like half an animal, like a couple miles or or more to get
right,
back to his camp. I'm just like,
right.
yo, that
Yeah,
is a lot of weight.
it's a lot of dedication. I mean, he pretty much trains
Yeah,
to be
just to
able to
do
haul
that.
out elk at during elk season. Like, yeah.
Well, and
I
he's
mean,
also an ultra runner, right? Like
yes, yeah,
110-mile runs
yeah,
or 150
yeah.
mile runs or something like that. It's absolutely insane. Um, yeah, you guys should become friends.
Probably. I'm here.
Yeah. Um, oh gosh, what was in my head? Okay, so then I think when I was down there visiting you guys, your wife was telling me that you worked in metal, or maybe it was you telling me, but you worked in metal fabrication.
Yeah, a
How
little bit. So I
yeah,
worked at a sheet metal fab shop for 6 years. And I mean, it didn't have a lot of, we weren't like obviously forging or doing any like heavy fabrication, or at least I wasn't. So it was mostly like sheet metal stuff, making metal cabinets and
okay,
a lot of metal cabinets. So, spot welding, TIG welding.
sure.
But, it did teach me like how to measure with calipers and like how to, I mean, which transfers over majorly, thinking in thousandths and stuff instead of
Right.
before it was always inches with a tape measure. So learning how that works, and transitions to being able to measure tighter tolerances, and learning like how to TIG weld and stuff. A lot of my, pretty much all my tools I either made or assembled from kits or from
Mm,
plans or stuff like that. So being able to fabricate my own work rests or angle rests and that kind of stuff, grinders and stands and all that kind of stuff, like that definitely was kind of a leg up, having some metal, even
sure.
though a lot of it didn't transition to like actually grinding knives or making knives. Like being able to make the tools and that kind of stuff was a huge help. And understanding, like we did a bit of grinding, not really what with a belt grinder, did a lot of like handheld grinders and stuff, but just understanding how to get a finish on
Yeah.
stuff, the grinder, it was helpful.
I've been playing with this idea of making a hexadecimal measuring ruler, because meters break down into centimeters, right? And
Right.
then the centimeters break down into tenths. Like they scale down.
Yeah.
But the imperial system doesn't do that.
Yeah.
A foot breaks down in 12 inches, but each of one of those inches don't break down into twelfths. They break down into halves, quarters. But I always thought it would be especially not for necessarily like machinist work, because I do think you need that precision for
Right.
machinist work, but for general carpentry and measuring work,
Yeah.
I always wish that like so my idea would be like I'd maybe do like a 12 or 18-inch ruler.
Right.
And one side would be like the standard imperial system. And then and then the other side would be a hexadecimal. So each
Right.
inch breaks down into twelfths because it can still break down into halves and quarters, but it can
Right.
also do thirds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have, and I use them a lot. I have one right here. A decimal. Have you seen an engineering tape measure?
No.
See if that shows up. So it
Oh my
actually
gosh, does that
breaks.
go down to 64th?
Yeah. So it breaks down into hundred thousandths,
Oh,
and so
wow.
it's really easy to do like 3.1, 3.125, 3.15, which like you would with a set of calipers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stanley is the only place I know that makes them. They're kind of hard to get, so I buy them on eBay when I can find them
Oh,
because
interesting.
I
What'd
have
you call it
them.
again? A machinist?
Yeah, it's maybe an engineer.
Oh,
It
engineer.
says decimal fractions, and so it has
Oh,
decimal
wow.
instead of just fractions, and so
Yeah.
which if you're used to using a set of calipers, like it's so I'll use that, yeah, for like measuring out scales and different stuff like that because
Sure.
it's easier in your head. Like, oh yeah, for me anyways. Like
No,
5.325, that kind of math is
yeah.
easier. Yeah.
Yeah. Because yeah, that's what is that? What is it? It's 30 seconds, right? So 17 30 seconds is 5.325.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
sorry, point. So I was thinking 0.5325. Sorry,
Yeah.
my bad. 5 inches and wait, what's 325? Because 375 is 3/8.
Right.
No,
Like a
I've had to
six,
like memorize it.
like a
But
16th of an inch is 0.060.
yeah,
An eighth of an inch, or it might be a little bit. It basically 0.060, and then an eighth inch is 0.125,
yeah.
and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I've had to just memorize it, and
Yeah.
especially numbers that I see a lot, and what is it? 3/16 is a new one for me.
Right.
So it was
0.75.
0.1875. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's but I've had to just memorize them. But if I was
Right.
seeing them all the time, I could
Right.
see how you'd be like, oh, 13/16 is whatever that is off the top of your
Right.
head. Yeah, that's
I
cool.
do the same
Engineers.
thing with millimeters because I don't use millimeters at all on a regular basis. So I'm like always on my phone looking at my little
Yeah,
thing that translates it from millimeters to decimal
right.
points or whatever. So the whole kitchen knife, everything's in millimeters thing. I'm like, what's 250 millimeters? Like that doesn't translate automatically in my mind.
Yeah,
Everybody seems to want to measure kitchen knives in
it's like
millimeters. So
10 and three
I,
sixteenths or something like
yeah,
that.
I try and accommodate.
Yeah. Well, and also because I do the Knife Talk podcast, and I teach to people who are from millimeter using countries,
Right.
and Celsius. I have to
Right.
convert all that stuff,
Yeah.
and some of it I have memorized, but especially the temperatures I'm not very good at yet.
Yeah.
Um, so I need like a cheat sheet.
I wish everything, I mean, we got it pretty good here, but the metric system's a superior system. I
Yeah,
just don't memorize.
yeah,
Like it's so simple, all ones and zeros, like
yeah,
all linear, and yeah,
yeah,
but nope.
yeah. Um, okay, so I want to back up a little bit. At what point did you start dabbling in knife making kind of more seriously, and to where you felt like you were a knife maker, but you also maybe still had like a full-time job, but were trying to work towards becoming maybe a full-time knife maker? Or to back that up, I guess maybe more like Because it sounds like you've been messing with knives for a long time, but I guess at what point did you decide that you really wanted to be serious about it and make it your career?
Yeah, so like probably October, I think, of 2010 is kind of when I
Okay.
count as when I started knife making. Um, yeah, that was the same time I was on Paleo Planet and Trad Gang, and I'd found blade forums by that point. And so I made my first like batch of knives out of an acquaintance of mine worked at a sawmill, and
Okay.
so he got me a bunch of 15 and 20, like the wide saw blades that
Like the
people.
ones that are in the background?
Yeah, those. It was probably those right
Those
there.
ones, exactly. I have
He
a
gave
few of those at my shop. I love
pile
them.
a pile of those a couple times. And so working at my sheet metal job, one of the benefits was they had a huge like 200-ton shear there, like a
Yeah.
massive thing. And what they didn't know didn't hurt them, that I was cutting these, these 3/4 hard, 3/4 hard
Three-quarter?
I don't know what they are. They're probably like 55 Rockwell or something like that.
Oh,
15.
three-quarter
They're not.
hard. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Not
That's
fully
probably
hardened.
not the right term, but they're not a little bit more than spring steel, hard. And so I was
Okay.
chunking these through their huge shear into pieces that would fit in my little. I had like a homemade forge at the time because I
Yeah,
can't grind them or cut them or anything on a bandsaw at this point. So I
right.
had to cut them into, like 4-inch wide pieces I could fit in a kiln to
Yeah.
try and anneal them as best I could. I was using like a brush burner forge that I'd put together,
Oh,
um, with a pellet stove blower. So it was like a blower and a brush burner, and it
mhm.
worked well enough to
Yeah.
get started. But I
Yeah.
could get those chunks of steel that I had dulled the shear blade with in there to anneal them, And so I was making these 15 and 20 blades, like 0.95 thick blades, so
Okay.
pretty thin.
Yeah.
And so I was making these little hunting knives. You can find pictures of them on the internet
Yeah.
if you look around. Um, yeah, that was like into 2010, and then by spring of 2011, I had kind of found out about the knife show in Eugene where I met you at. Um,
Oh,
and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I should probably do a knife show. I've been doing this for 5 months.
right.
But the table was pretty cheap, and it was one of those things. I'm like, I should just go for it, like
Sure.
instead of talking myself out of it. Just go for it, get a table. And I had probably a dozen knives or something of these really thin bandsaw blade, wooden handles, Osage and Purple Heart and Bloodwood and Paduke, all the inexpensive like cabinet shop type woods that you get at a craft store.
Right.
Mosaic pins and hand filed spines, with texture and stuff. And
It's all
I think
classic.
I sold maybe 2 knives or something.
Okay.
And I think maybe I'd already sold a couple online on a couple of these forums. People had like reached out, hey, is that for sale? You know how it goes. And like sold a couple there. And that gave me the confidence to do the knife show, and sold a couple more knives. And, I was like, oh, I can make some money and kind of pay for this hobby.
Yeah.
I just had, like I said, a brush burner forge, and I think a 4x36 Harbor Freight grinder that
Oh, right.
I built like a little out of sheet metal, like a little platen that kind of tensioned the belt up. So you got like a slack section you could grind on. So
Okay.
like split underneath the belt.
Yeah.
And so I was grinding all these little knives on that. I skipped what is it, the 1x72, what's the little vertical one everybody kind of starts with?
Oh, the 1 by 30.
Yeah, 1x30. Like
Yeah.
I skipped that and like took a couple steps back to a far and here, because I already had it for like making bows and stuff for doing
Sure.
the risers and everything. So I already had that.
Right.
But yeah, started getting some interest. I was, posting. It was internet knife making was a thing, so not like it is now. But so I was posting pictures of my work. people would say, hey, is that for sale? I'd sell it, and eventually I'd, buy a membership that allowed me to sell on these
Right.
sites. So
This was like
yeah.
Blade Forums, or this was also...
Yeah, the other site, like I think Blade Forums and Trad Gang, I don't think Paleo Planet had much of a sales platform.
I
Uh,
gotcha.
but yeah, definitely Blade Forums like that. Like a lot of guys back then, I don't think as much anymore. But like that was kind of 90% of my knife making information and sales and
Right.
conversation. Like it was mostly on there. Um, but yeah, it was, yeah. So that was 2011. So I started I count as like starting 2010. That
Yeah.
was 2011, and it just kind of rolled from there. Get buying little upgrades. Like I eventually upgraded to a used 2x48, I think, is kind of the
Okay.
next step. It's like the step below a 2x72. And that the shop I worked at had an old one, and it
Right.
was, I don't know, it was some crazy RPMs because it had this huge drive wheel on it, and it was on or off. But it
Okay.
was,
So it was like one of those bench grinder setups.
yeah, kind of, yeah. So it
Yeah.
was just a drive wheel right on the end of a motor,
Yeah.
and it had a vertical wheel that has a little bit of tracking on the top,
Oh,
and a platen. So it was a million times better than like a 4x36 as far as grinding a knife. It's at least in the same orientation that most people are used to. A
yeah, sure.
vertical 2-inch belt, and so
Right.
the belt was like, back and forth,
That
but it
tension.
was
You got to get
still
that
like,
tension.
yeah, no, I know. But yeah, it was still like a major upgrade,
Yeah.
and I picked that up for like a couple $100, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I was still working at the sheet metal place at the time. I started there, I think, in 2008. And so 2010, I started, kind of dabbling, making knives and stuff like that.
Mm.
And, it was not a great paying job. I was spot welding, doing that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I started, doing, I'd get off of work and come home at like 4 o'clock. And then as it got into it, 2011, 2012, I was basically just coming home and working for, 4 hours a day at the end of the day, making knives. And like fast forward to like 2014, and I'm like, I'm, making more money
Mm.
in 4 or 5 hours a day in my second shift at home making knives than I am at my job. It's
Wow.
probably a good idea to just quit my job, like, because I
Yeah.
didn't enjoy it. It was just, kind of, it was work, and I had at that time I had, trying to think how many kids I had at that point. My oldest was born in 2008, and then my middle kid was born in 2011. And so I had two kids. So, it was a pretty big decision to be
Sure.
like, yeah, let's put this all on my hobby to pay the bills. And my wife was doing, I think she was doing in-home daycare at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, but it wasn't our income really.
Sure.
So yeah, but knives were going well. I was, selling most of what I posted on Blade forums and that kind of stuff, and doing, a show or two a year. Yeah, so 2014, my wife was pregnant with our third child. So that's the perfect time to quit your steady job and lose
Yep.
insurance and all of that. But like, sick of the that grind and wanted to do a different one, so to say.
Sure.
Like, so yeah, I just, like, I think it was like April of 2014, I went full time, all knives. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can, if you feel like you're willing to go a little bit deeper on that, I think there are a lot of makers who struggle with trying to determine, and obviously it's going to be case by case scenario. Everybody's got to make their own choices. But for you in that specific situation, if you can go a little bit deeper into how you decided, because like you said, you were getting rid of kind of like health
Yeah.
insurance and a steady income and stuff like that. How did you come to the decision, other than the money being
Right.
better? What other what were like how, because you were still losing, I guess if you quit the
Right.
day job, then you're losing that portion of income as well as, like you said, the
Right.
health insurance and stuff like that. So finding that balance in making that decision, trying to figure that out, because I guess if you were dedicated, well, I'll let you answer, but in my mind, I'm like, okay, if you're making more in that 4 hour period, but then you double that in one
Right.
day, then you're maybe making like 4 times as much in one day than you
Right.
would make in your normal job, and maybe that compensates for it. But I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean,
Like,
it's
can you go into it?
obviously we sell luxury items. Like, we're not selling bread,
Right,
you know. So
right.
how you look
They're not necessary for
right, right,
sustaining
right. I
life.
mean, you can buy a knife at a big box store that will essentially do everything you need. So like people don't
Right.
need to buy, a high-end handmade knife. Like, there we go, sideways again. They don't need to buy a handmade knife when something else will do just fine. So I mean, you're selling a luxury item. Um,
Right.
so but I mean, but at that point, like I said, I was making decent money, and I mean, I wasn't. It helps that I was like not making good money at my other job, but it would be a harder transition, I suppose, if you're like, well, I'm making $40 an hour, and I have benefits, and I have all this. Like, I think it would have been more
Right.
difficult for me, even though it should have been the same decision. But I wasn't. I was making at the time like 14.50 an hour or something, which was not good for what I was doing. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's a gamble. Like, you have, like, yeah, I'm selling everything I'm making right now, but there's kind of that in the back of your head, like, well, tomorrow maybe
Is it gonna
nobody's
last
going to want to
forever?
buy anything I ever make again. Like, I think everybody
Right.
has that kind of fear. Like, tomorrow everybody's going to hate
Right.
me. Like, they like it now, but so, but I'm like, well, I'm making good money. Or making decent money, making knives in the amount of time I have. I'm not making great money at my other job. My other job is a boring dead end job. Like, I really don't have
Mm.
anything to lose because I could just go get another boring dead end job if this doesn't pan out. I mean, that's
Yeah,
easy to
sure.
say, but nobody likes looking for a job or having that,
Right.
insecure.
No, but I do think that is a g like, I was washing
Right.
dishes and prepping in kitchens, and so I was like, "Okay, I guess if this doesn't work, I can always go back to prepping and working in kitchens and
Right.
washing dishes."
100%. Yeah. And something I didn't mention, like, I get asked that a lot, is like people wanting to just, I want to start making knives and go full time and make it a job. I think they see a little bit of success, and they see the
Mhm.
hope and the fun and all of that hobby, being a job. But I mean, to kind of get to your point about being successful long term, like, I did it for 4 years part time. Like, and in
Yeah.
my opinion, that's the right way to start probably any business, like, and be successful,
Sure.
and especially something that you've never done before. So if you're thinking like,
Mhm.
yeah, I want to make knives, that looks like fun. I watched Fortune Fire. I see these guys, having a full-time job making knives and stuff. Like, try it
Yeah.
first, see if you even enjoy it in a year, because it might be just something that's fun for a minute, and
Right.
not only are you not enjoying it as a hobby, but now you're trying to make a living doing it. And
Sure.
and guys getting loans to buy grinder. I mean, you think I got to buy the
Right.
grinders, and I got to get the oven, and I got to get all of this stuff. I kind of did that obviously over time. So I had
Yeah.
kind of the equipment I needed to get, so I never took out any loans. I never taken anybody's like down payments for knives. And not that that's not a bad thing to do, but if you don't have discipline, like I've seen that ruin more knife making businesses than I can count, and it's almost always kind of the downfall, or at least, part of the
Yeah.
downfall of you.
It almost
Yeah, I
ruined
mean,
me.
you get popular, and people are saying, "Here, take
Yeah.
my money for a knife you're gonna make me,"
Yeah.
and then you get a huge backlog of
Yeah.
stuff people have already paid you for, and that really takes the wind out of your sails of like
Right.
getting a paycheck after you finish a knife. It just
Yeah, and the dynamic between you and the client or the customer
100%.
changes dramatically. At that point, they've given
Yeah.
you money,
That.
and now you owe
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
something.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's and at the time I was taking orders, but it was a lot more casual. Like, tell me what you
Sure.
want. I'll get to it at
Yeah.
some point, but I don't want any money. And so
Sure.
it kind of takes that pressure off of me. And not to be rude to customers, but it takes like some of that power that is felt as someone who's already giving you money, like you owe me and this is what I want. And,
Yeah.
and so I've always kind of taken that a little bit more serious about, I don't want anybody's money because I don't want a boss. Like I quit my other job
Sure.
because I didn't want a
So you didn't
boss.
have
And if
yeah.
you're paying me ahead of time, you're kind of my boss now. And when you
Right.
have 10, 20, 30 people on your waiting list, and you have 10, 20, 30 bosses sending you emails, like that takes the
Yeah.
joy out of it for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like that's really insightful for somebody, especially, like, if you hadn't run a business basically
Yeah,
up
I
to
had.
that point. Where is that something you'd seen modeled or you in some way, either positively or negatively through
Yeah,
somebody
not
else? And if
not really. Like
okay.
mean, I didn't really know anybody other than contractors that kind of owned their own business. But
Yeah.
it was pretty typical in construction to take some money ahead of time for
Right,
materials
at
and
least for the
that. But
materials.
no, it was just, I don't know. I think it really was as basic as I don't want people to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Like I think that it's definitely a really good business model, especially for an individual small business. Like I think it's a good business model if you can. The cost of materials for making the type of knives I was making was very small. Like at the
Sure.
time I was still, back before 2014, I was still using a lot of like reclaimed saw blades and that kind of stuff. So it wasn't like I was buying a bar of Damasteel for $400 and a
Yeah.
chunk of ivory for the handle, and so it wasn't like I was in it $800-900 before I
Right.
even started. And that can get tricky, when you're taking high end orders for people. Anymore, I don't take orders. Like that was kind of
Yeah.
where I got to eventually, to kind of avoid all of the pitfalls of it. Um, and that comes with positives and negatives as well. Like I think
Mhm.
it's perfectly acceptable to take orders, and it's totally fine taking money ahead of time if you are a responsible adult who can handle having money that isn't yours, like
Yeah.
in your account.
Well, and I think also just, like, self-driven, self-motivated to
Right.
get into the shop and grind.
Right.
Like, there are some people who are just built like that, which is great,
Yeah.
and they can operate that way. I thought that that's what I had going, and it turns out I'm not. And, yeah, it was pretty rough for a while.
Yeah.
Um, if I could go back, honestly, I would've I would've either continued to do more work with retailers, or do like a slow burn thing without taking people's money
Right.
until I got to the point of enough demand for my work and people signed up for a newsletter that I could kind of probably do a little bit of both, but
Right.
eventually transition to just doing a newsletter. Because at a certain point, especially if it's a slow burn, you're taking your time, you're building up that reputation, that audience, that
Right.
demand for your work. Eventually, it kind of snowballs and it kind of carries itself.
Right.
And and that way you're working on your own terms. You're making what you want to make, what's interesting to you, what's creative for you, and then you're
Right.
just putting it out there. These people are kind of a built-in purchasing system. It's not
Right.
guaranteed that everybody's going to love everything you make, but
Right.
most of the people who are signed up for your newsletter, they're already activated. You don't have to try to find people to sell stuff to. They're
Right.
already there. They said,
Right.
"I want I'm signing up so that
Yeah.
when you have something for sale, I want to buy it possibly."
Right.
Um and then yeah, but anymore like and I think part of my problem was I came from like a weird blend of like the old school mindset, which was like the way success was kind of measured for a lot of custom makers was how deep your backlog was.
Right. Yeah.
And and I think now the success or I think well, and I guess that's outwardly visible, but I guess I wish I definitely wish I had done things differently. Honestly, just like I had said. And there's still I've kind of eventually it took me I think it took me like 11 years to finally
Yeah.
transition to that model.
Yeah.
Um, but I started by retailing and then I was doing custom orders and I was taking people's money. That sounds like I'm stealing people's money.
Yeah.
No, I was accepting deposits,
Yeah.
and then that was kind of the cash flow for paying for things as they were
Right.
going, and then I would get to finishing those builds. But like, I think the thing that really weighed on me was pressure I was honestly putting on myself when mistakes would happen. Mistakes
Right.
do happen,
Right.
but when that happens to one knife, every knife behind that gets
Right.
pushed back,
Yeah.
and it compounds every time it happens.
Right.
And there's always something on just about, at least for me, on just about every knife that either slows down the process or I have to backstep
Right.
and fix. And the pressure I was putting on myself was just like this sense of disappointing people or letting people
Right.
down because I've accepted some money from them as a deposit and then feeling like these people are like, well, where's my stuff? Why is it taking longer than what you had originally quoted? And it's
Right.
because stuff
Right.
happens and things get pushed back. And eventually I got to where I am now, which is um yeah, just doing a newsletter, building stuff, staying out on a newsletter. But yeah, it
Right.
was kind of rough for a while. But
Yeah.
I finally got there.
Having that kind of pressure, like on, I mean, it's already pressure on yourself making a knife, like
Yeah.
to not mess it up because it's annoying and you don't want to start over. But when it's literally, oh, my paycheck this week relies on me being successful,
Yeah.
building this to the specs that was requested of me, I don't really have any room for interpretation or change anymore. Like someone ordered a 7-inch tipped choil, chef knife. If I lose a quarter inch off the end, that's not what they ordered, or,
Oh, yeah.
whatever it is, or if I break the only piece of blackwood I had and now I'm doing bog oak, that's not what they ordered,
Right.
when it would have been totally fine to either of those scenarios if you just finished the knife and, put it up for sale.
Yeah.
But again, that adds a variable that's uncomfortable as a business owner. Like, are people still going to buy my stuff? Like, if
Right.
I put this up for sale? But yeah, just
Yeah.
having the faith, like, I've gotten this far on this business model of making. I mean, if you make something out of left field, like, oh, I'm going to make a Damascus shovel this week, like, you might not have the market to sustain that.
Yeah.
But like you trust, like, oh yeah, I've been making these types of knives for this many years. They are popular. I know people like them. And you just make knives for your market as opposed to making knives for an individual customer.
Sure.
That seems to work out
Mm.
for me.
Yeah, no, that's a well, and I think that brings me to kind of like my next question is like, how did you how did you settle on a style or develop your style? And I guess another part of that question is like, how have you found yeah, found how have you kind of distinguished your work or defined your work as your own? Because I feel like I see all kinds of knives out there, but when I see a knife that's yours, I know it's yours without seeing the maker's mark.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what everybody hopes for, but in a positive way.
Sure.
Sometimes there's knives you're like, oh, I know whose that is.
Ooh.
But we all start there. Like my beginning knives definitely had a style that I'd be like, yeah, I'm not super proud of that, but it's kind of that beginning knife maker look.
Mhm.
I think all of my stuff, I mean, as a general, like kind of I start with function first.
Sure.
Like I'm not interested in a lot of features that don't actually serve a purpose. Um, I'm not interested in like crazy materials just stacked together on a handle just for, I mean, I think it can look gaudy and I'm just like, keep it like having one nice material or, some nice accents, that kind of stuff. But yeah, just function first,
Yeah.
especially with blade design and geometry and, you know, and durability, not having like features that are gonna, put like a stress riser on the blade, that you absolutely don't need there. Um, as far as like my specific style that I do now, which I mean, as some people might not know, is kind of primarily Japanese style, modern Japanese style Quakens and Tantos and that stuff. A lot of wrapped handles and different
Yeah.
stuff like that. That style kind of came about. I'm trying to think when, but via blade forums.
Oh, really?
Um, I don't
And that's
remember.
probably actually where I saw some of your work for the first time,
Yeah,
probably over on Blade forums.
yeah. So kind of that started with some different kind of Phil Hartsfield and Don Fogg, Stuart Branson.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to think of who else. Uh, Jimmy Fikes, that kind of stuff. Like
Matthew
especially
Gregory does some
especially
of that
Phil
kinda stuff,
Hartsfield.
right?
What's that?
Matthew Gregory?
Yeah, Matthew Gregory. Yeah, we were both kind of coming up at the same time there.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I kind of started with doing like a Phil Hartsfield style strong boy, which is kind of that traditional, what people consider like an American style Tanto, straight blade,
Okay.
angled tip. And I made one of those, and I think it was in some sort of ongoing thread on Blade forums. It was pretty popular. I'm like, oh, I really, and I'd made a couple more. Yeah, that's a good example of kind of the tip, that second one down.
Yeah. I gotcha.
And I'd made a couple Japanese style blades that were more of like a swooping tip, and they had a hamon and a wrapped handle, but they're pretty crude. Um, but yeah, I got into doing kind of that Phil Hartsfield style grind, and then kind of there was I think it was Joe Perrony was doing a thread at the time talking
Okay.
about field stuff,
The
and
original influencer.
yeah, 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 him and Nick Wheeler,
Yeah.
uh, talking about like adding a lot of sori, which is, people that don't know, is like curvature in a blade, which you traditionally see, yeah, which you traditionally see in longer Japanese swords, but doing that in like a 5-inch blade. And so I
Yeah.
kind of sketched something up in that strong boy style that Hartsfield had, but with a curved blade in a shorter size, which is something I don't think I'd ever seen him do. Um, but yeah, just really crisp transitions from bevel to flats and nice. I really like a nice radius plunge line. I think that
Yeah.
looks better.
I
It
do too.
flows better.
Absolutely.
But yeah, just
It
having,
also reduces like a stress riser, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think just aesthetically, it's a lot nicer than a sharp angled plunge
For
grind.
sure. I think that's probably why I was asking you all that time ago. I was like, "How do you do that? It
Right.
looks so good."
Yeah. Yeah. Getting it symmetrical is the trick.
Yeah.
Which when I started, like I was doing, quite a few chisel ground knives because that's kind of
Yeah.
what Hartsfield was known for.
Okay, so it's only grinding bevels from one side, basically.
Yeah, and so it's a lot easier to like that one on the right in the middle there. If you go up one and then on the far right
Yeah.
on the other side, maybe my left.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But yeah, just so it's a
The
lot easier
burgundy
to land
one?
plunges when you only have one plunge.
Yeah.
So, but I like the performance and the ease of use, especially for someone who's right or left-handed, like of a double ground knife. So
Sure.
I haven't done very many chisel ground knives. I kind of do that. I would do them occasionally, like when I was still taking orders. Some people prefer that,
Yeah.
but pretty much, I think a lot of people think a lot of these are chisel ground because I did used to do that, but I rarely do any chisel ground knives at all anymore.
I gotcha.
But yeah, so that I kind of started doing that Japanese, modern Japanese style with Sukaito style handles with either Turk's knots or guards. And that was very popular and I enjoyed doing it. And that has kind of just developed into what I'm primarily known for and what people want from me. So
Sure.
yeah, that's kind of what I do for the most part. And I've
Do you
taken that into kitchen knives a little bit too, with kind
Sure.
of Japanese inspired kitchen knives and then bigger knives like swords and wakizashi
Mhm.
and tanto and that kind of stuff.
So I know I like at least from my own experience, I feel like I've kind of pigeonholed myself for
Yeah,
being known for for
same.
kind of knife, a particular style of knife. Yeah, so I guess that was gonna be my question. Do you feel like you've done that, or are you still finding yourself enjoying making those style knives?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% still enjoy those. Like,
Okay,
I prefer making that type of knife. But on the flip side, like if I want to do a batch of kitchen knives, sometimes it's a couple years between me doing that. And
sure.
people are like, I didn't know you made kitchen knives. I'm not interested in those. So it's like something I'm interested in doing periodically, or hunting
Right.
knives or whatever. Like I enjoy exploring those different things, especially kitchen knives, like because I use one every day. And
Sure.
so I think that's a great avenue for a custom knife. Like it's one of the few knives that you can use every single day and really like get a feel for like, oh yeah, this handle is really comfortable or not, or this edge
Right.
geometry that kind of looks good isn't great, and so it kind of breaks down a knife in a way that other knives can't, unless you're maybe a hunter or something that's using a knife all the time.
Like
Most
practically
other
as a
knives
tool.
have
Yeah,
room
yeah.
for kind of room for error if you're using them just every once in a while. Like it doesn't
Right.
have to be perfect at anything.
Yeah.
But
That maybe kind of brings us to another question I had for you about blade geometry, because I think a great opportunity that I have, or we have, with having you on here right now is that you do knife styles that are very different from culinary knives,
right,
and I was hoping that you could kind of touch on blade geometry and just kind of kind of what you've done to kind of figure your geometry out, like what kind of thickness at the edge before sharpening, what kind of
right,
angle are the primary grinds happening at in the first place before sharpening, um in regards to the cutting performance or whatever, and like what kind of factors you're looking for on some of these harder use tools, because these are knives like I could see people taking these into the field, or military personnel taking them
right,
out and using them on out in the field, as well as like hunters taking these into the bush, or like bushcrafters using these. Like these are hard use tools that can be pried on. And
right,
how do you figure that out, um, for yourself, so that you feel confident in the tool that you're making for people?
right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I would say, starts with your steel choice and
Okay.
your ability to either outsource or do proper heat treat yourself. Like, so before geometry, like you have to have quality steel, but primarily a quality heat treat. Like
Mm-hmm.
any decent steel, you can make a high quality knife out of. Like if it has enough carbon in it and you can refine the grain, you can make a good knife out of the cheapest carbon steel. I mean, it might involve some differential heat treatment on the spine and a harder edge, whatever, but understanding heat treat or outsourcing it to somebody that really does, like I would say, is geometry is number two, but I'd say that's number one, like in the
Okay.
performance of a knife.
Yeah.
As far as durability and, edge retention and that kind of stuff. But like you can have amazing geometry, but if your heat treat is garbage, it's still going to break. Like your edges
Right.
chip out because you went as thin as you should have, or it's just going to break at the spine because you were prying on it like you shouldn't have. But with
Sure.
a quality heat treat, like I think that's kind of the foundation block of any good knife. And for that, like I use primarily CPM 3V, which I've always used tough steels. Like I started with 15 and 20, which is
Okay.
kind of like one of the toughest versions of a carbon steel you can get that's still pretty basic.
Right.
Did a little bit in A2, which is to me kind of a precursor to 3V. And then as soon as I
Oh,
found
interesting.
3V, I was like, pretty much have used that almost exclusively since. Um, but yeah, geometry, like having a steel that you can actually get what I would consider is the proper knife geometry. You need
Mm,
something that's gonna support the thinness at the edge that you require for depending on what you're making. Um, and a lot of, I mean, I feel as a knife maker, it's really just getting comfortable making the edge thinner the longer you've been making knives.
sure.
Like you
Just keep
start out,
pushing it. Keep
it's
pushing it.
like, you know, eighth inch or whatever is like, wow, that's really thin behind the edge. And I think part of that is just being tired of grinding on a knife and you're like, that's close enough. Let's heat treat it or whatever. So just getting like learning that the thinner the edges, like no matter what, the thinner the edges, the better it will cut. Now you
Yeah.
have to obviously balance that between durability depending on your task. And so you can do that by changing the spine thickness. But even on a really thick knife, like I still go down to really thin on the edge. So even if it's like a
Mm,
3/8 inch thick tomahawk that I'm making,
yeah.
just because it's a thick, beefy tool, I don't want to leave necessarily more meat right behind the edge.
Sure.
It transitions to more meat more abruptly because the spine is thicker. But I'm still going down to maybe 20 thousandths at the edge, and I just adjust that, with the
Yeah.
bevel height. So I wouldn't do it, if it was a 6 inch high bevel, you couldn't do that because it wouldn't leave enough behind the edge on a chopping tool.
Right.
But yeah, like on my kind of the Quakens and different stuff I do, I do them a lot thinner. That's the other thing, is using thinner steel. Like I used to use way too thick a steel for everything. But
Okay.
when you're using, a tough steel like 3V, I've kind of started going thinner. So anymore, it's like around 3/16 is kind of the thick knives I make, unless it's a Tanto.
Okay.
Um, and those generally have kind of, I'd say, maybe a 60% height bevel is what I look for aesthetically. So from the edge to the spine, maybe 60%
Mm,
of the
I got
blade.
you. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
rough number, but just visually, I think right around there looks good on that style knife.
Sure. Yeah.
So balancing that with spine thickness. If it's a thicker spine, I'm going to need a taller bevel. Otherwise, it's just not, going to perform well cutting. But in that range, 3/16, about a 50% to 60% bevel height. And on those, I want to take those down to not quite zero, but 5 to 10 thousandths, maybe
Oh wow.
maybe a little bit thicker. Like if I know it's going to be a really hard use knife, I'll go a little bit thicker than that. If I know it's going to be someone's like, oh yeah, I'm getting this to butcher animals, whatever, I'll
Yep.
go a little bit thinner if they're not going to be
Sure.
really abusing it. But yeah, thin at the edge, I think, is the key to kind of all knife making. And it's just finding that balance of how much meat do I need behind that, say an 1/8 inch up the blade or a 1/4 inch up the blade. And that's really going to be task specific. On a kitchen knife, like, like a Nakiri or something, like it might be really thin, 1 inch up the blade, 2 inches up the blade, 3 inches up the blade. But on like a Quaken or a Tanto or something like that, I'm still going to aim, for 10 thousandths or something at the edge, but it'll transition to 3/16 in a half inch. So
So what your primary, so if we want to do some quick definitions really quick, but
yeah.
would you agree that the primary bevel, so if you have flat stock, your primary bevel is the main bevel you're seeing on the knife, and then the secondary or sharpening bevel
Right.
is the sharpening bevel, right?
Yeah. Right.
So determining your primary bevel, are you using any programs or anything to map that out, or are you just kind of trial and error with an angle, like a table,
Yeah,
and
I
relationship
have
to flatness stuff?
I don't remember where I found it, but if you look up like knife angle chart,
Okay.
I think maybe might have been on Travis Wirt's website initially that I found, and he had it for his surface grinder. But basically, it was an angle to length of grind to stock thickness chart.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I can try and send that to you. Maybe you can add it in later.
Yeah.
Um, but basically, I have like a chart. So if and it doesn't have every stock thickness. So sometimes you got to kind of shoot for the middle between bevel height. And it's basically just a chart that has stock thickness and then bevel height. And then you meet in the middle at which degree it's going to put it off of the flats.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the ballpark. I'll say, okay, I'm at 0.172 stock thickness and my blade's 1.125 tall, and I want the grind to be 0.625 tall, and it'll, it's like, okay, that's going to
Also known
be,
as 5/8.
yeah. Or how many millimeters?
I don't know.
But yeah, I don't either. But, and then it'll say, okay, that's going to be a 5-degree angle.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yep.
That about that. And most of the stuff, like I said earlier, like I had the ability to kind of make my own work rests and angle rests and that kind of
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so most of my stuff, I'm like, that have a short bevel like that, I have an extreme angle work rest that I built. And so I can actually dial in probably as low as maybe like 3.5, 4 degrees of
Oh,
angle off of the flat, which works for most any thicker stock, blades up to maybe 1.75 inch wide bevel.
wow. Okay.
So getting into kitchen knives and stuff like that, I can't do that. Those are all like completely freehand by eye.
Ooh, Mr.
Yeah.
Fancy.
Yeah. But yeah, on the other stuff, where I'm getting those crispy bevels, to answer your question you
Yeah.
asked me like 10 years ago, that's how I'm doing it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I can basically dial. I have like a digital angle finder, and so I'll kind of dial in my platen to angle rest ratio, and get
Sure.
it set at the angle I want, and then just go from there. So yeah, I don't really like using jigs because it really limits
Right.
how you can hold a blade and the angle of the blade, like the rotation of the blade. You're
Oh
limited
yeah.
how you can do it.
Yeah, because you do a really great job of getting your scratch lines to run
Right,
perpendicular to the edge, which
right.
is really nice
Which
and
you
getting it to
can't do off of a flat
yeah,
rest and a jig.
right.
Yeah, so getting the grind lines to follow the radius and angle as opposed to being perpendicular to the spine,
Yeah.
which is really the only way to get that transition. I'm pointing at my screen like people can see it.
They could see it. Keep pointing.
Yeah, the only way to get that transition at the tip, the Yokote line, is really
Right.
to change that angle on the they're holding the blade out
Yeah.
in
I'll go back up
regards
to
to the
that
platen, which you can't do on a work rest with a
with the
jig.
jig.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
hear a kitty cat in the background.
yeah. He's snuck in here. If he's
Little
loud,
meow face.
I'll
No,
get
no,
him.
no, he's fine.
Okay,
He's fine. We had, Jason Ellard on here, Ellard Blacksmithing, and his dog was woofing up a storm at one point. I didn't care. I don't care.
bro. He
Oh,
he
he's gonna come
comes
say
out of the
hello?
shop if I leave the door open. Wants us to chase him. Gets all covered in dirt and grime, and then wants back in the house. But I'm the only one home, so apparently he's blessing me with his.
Now he's quite loud.
Yeah,
He sounds like he's getting closer.
he did get closer.
Mr. Fluff Pants. What's that cat's name again?
Wicket.
Wicket, that's right.
Yeah, like
Wicket.
like the
Like
Ewok.
from Star Wars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Are you a big Star Wars fan? Yeah, let's talk about that actually a little bit because I feel like you are a big Star Wars fan
yeah,
and you've incorporated it into your work in a lot of fun
yeah.
ways.
Pre Disney Star Wars fan. I feel like you have to make that disclaimer nowadays.
You
If
you were yeah, pre-Disney, but you all are also a fan of the
oh
Mandalorian
yeah,
series, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it's hard not to be. It was
yeah,
very good.
yeah. No, I mean, I grew up on that. I was a child of the '80s. Like, I think I was born the year Return of the Jedi came out, so I just squeaked in as
That was
being
84, right? That was the year I was born.
83.
83.
83.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Oh, that's right. You're older than me.
that's right.
You
Look
are old. Oh my god.
at old man.
Ugh.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's fun, and I mean, it's fun forcing my kids to like that stuff too,
Yeah.
as you do as a dad. The stuff I like is the stuff you'll like too, right? Like,
It's the
that's
only
your
way we're gonna
taste.
be friends.
Yeah, exactly.
That's hilarious. Oh
Yeah,
man, I'm trying. Well, actually, I showed one earlier in the video. It had all like the Mandalorian color tones
yeah. I think at
going
the
on in
very
the
should be
guard.
at like the top of my Instagram page, pretty close to the top. There was an axe I did recently,
Okay, let's see. Oh, here
and probably in the last 6, 7 posts, maybe.
looks like here's some pendants you made.
Oh, you're way back there. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, deep digging back.
Yep, that
2020.
that was right after I got my laser engraver, which is
Yeah.
super
Oh, I
fun.
see.
Yep,
Using the Lego uh
yep,
positioning. Yep, I love it.
yep,
Consistency is key.
yep.
Oh my god, that's so good.
Getting away from stencils and acid etch was like
Yeah.
the biggest dream of mine. I hate stencil
Yeah.
etch.
Yeah, I want it. And it's a fiber laser, right? That does that on the steel?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, jeez, look at all that Beskar.
That's right.
Goodness. You're rich.
Yep.
Oh my god, I
Those
can't
are
stop.
titanium, by the way. I can't make anything out of either titanium or 3V, or that's not out of titanium or 3V.
Yeah. Oh, actually, that was actually something I wanted to while I'm digging around pulling up this Mandalorian stuff. I don't know anything about 3V. So can you talk about like I guess some of the virtues of 3V and why you love it so much in regards to performance as well as heat treating qualities or I guess
Yeah. So
ease of heat
like
treat if that's
probably
possible.
shortly after I was kind of getting into this style that I do now with the Japanese style blades, like I think it was probably Dan Keffler and Nathan Carruthers. Like, I saw
Yeah.
kind of really doing probably Dan first, because he was doing some YouTube videos and stuff with his crazy swords that he was making and still makes,
Right.
like
Oh, is he
chopping
making them out of 3V?
hard. And I mean, he's a absolute monster of a man, and so he was like had
Yeah.
these big like modern katanas he was making in 3V, like one hitting like a 3-inch tree in his backyard, just like dropping it like some anime.
Oh, right. I remember
and,
seeing that.
and then he'd like lodge it in a tree and bend it to, you know, almost 90
Oh,
degrees.
yeah. Jeez, I forgot about those videos.
They're great videos, like definitely
They're so good.
look him up on, he's not as active on Instagram, but like his videos on YouTube that he used to make were
Yeah.
pretty epic. And that's definitely what got me interested in 3V, because A2 was kind of, I wouldn't say the direct precursor to that because the chemistry is different, but it was known as, you know, a tough steel, but deep hardening, air quenched, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just the stuff that he was doing, and then that Nathan Carruthers was doing with 3V,
Right.
his knives, and like the geometry they were able to take them to and still be extremely tough, you know, hold a really good edge. And then like heat treating, again, going back to heat treat, like doing
Right.
properly, which at the time, still, I would say there aren't a lot of people doing that, other than, you know, if you go through Peter's heat treat, I think they're able to kind of do basically Dan and Nathan's original 3V heat treat. I know they're doing a
Oh, they'll, like,
slightly,
offer it as a service?
if you ask for it,
Oh,
yeah.
interesting. Right. Yeah, that's
But
right. I forgot that, Peters is, like, a sponsor for Dan Kessler, who's, like,
yeah,
world cutting competition champion,
yeah,
like, at I don't know if he's the current one, but at one point, he was, like, 3 or 4 or 5 years
right,
running,
yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people doing it now. But yeah,
Yeah.
and that was also part of it. Like I never did any of the cutting competition stuff or even really made a competition cutter.
Yeah.
But those are kind of a really good example of the extremes you can push. I wouldn't, I mean, it's a hard use knife. Hey, I don't know what you're talking about. Star Wars is so stupid and I never,
The worst.
yeah.
So boring. Not interesting at
These
all.
are all just to make my kids like cringe.
Oh, dad, you're so cringy.
Yeah. Give dad a phone and access to the internet and adult.
You did good. You did good. I'm proud of you.
But yeah, like the competition cutters, like they're really pushing what you can do in geometry for a knife. Like,
Right.
and they're limited by like only a maximum of 2 inches wide, which is a pretty
Sure.
wide knife. But like doing a full height flat grind, you know, down to nearly zero,
Right.
and then chopping through 2x4s and hemp rope, and then slicing like vertical paper and hanging paper and ping pong balls and tennis, like all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like it really puts a knife through its paces of, you
Yeah,
know, you
without
chop a couple
especially
two by,
crushing those ping pong balls.
yeah, 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 right. You got to chop a couple 2x4s and then slice a straw, you know, end to end, freestanding, or a sheet of hanging paper. So it really showed, like, I'm like, okay, yeah. And a lot of them were using 3V to do
Yeah.
that. And so, you know, I got interested in that, and then talking to Dan and stalking Nathan, every post Nathan made
He's just
on
oh, he
Blaze,
posted again.
like trying to figure out how to heat treat it, because I knew it was like a special heat treat. Like there's an
Yeah.
industry standard heat treat that is okay, but it was never made for knives. And that's kind of what most, you know, factory knives, small production knives, and most other makers were using, was a factory heat treat, which, you know, no cryo, and involved like a high temperature temper, I think around like 1,000 degrees or something.
Right.
And so it's basically a different steel at that point. Yeah, there you go.
I
That
just
might
pulled
be.
up for people listening only right now.
Yeah,
I pulled up a video, so you got to go to the YouTube and watch the video. But Dan, it is a video of Dan Keffler doing some of his chopping into what looks like a very old 2x4.
yeah, rock hard.
Yeah, we'll back it up. It'll cycle again,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
and like 2 swiping through. That might be a
Watch
2x6.
his first chop. Oh yeah, actually, you're right. Whew, halfway through. Oh! He's basically got it chopped at that point.
Yeah, basically 2 cuts, and he's through a like aged pine 2x6, and then to top it off, bending his blade at probably a 45-degree angle there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was impressed, and I wanted some of
To say
that
the
in
least.
my knives.
Yeah. Dan's pretty awesome.
Yeah, great guy. Like
Yeah.
always willing to talk to me on the phone.
Woo.
Yeah.
Choppy.
Yeah, I think that's Carruthers collaboration.
Oh, okay.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, his stuff's great. He's a good dude. I
Mhm.
love seeing him at Blade Show. And these big chops he does. Oh my
Yeah.
god. All the way through one
Yeah,
chop.
the knee up. Yep. Amazing.
Oh, so good. Ugh, I remember the first time I saw him do that. I was like, whoa, what?
Yeah. And he's a chiropractor by trade. This is just his hobby.
Yeah. He's a very talented chiropractor also, by the way.
I wish I lived closer.
I did too. I do too. I mean, I'm closer than you.
Yeah.
He's like 2 hours away, 2.5 hours. But it's almost, oh my god, here it is. It's almost worth driving over there to go visit him.
Yeah.
To go get some chiropractor work done. This is him chopping through, like, it looks like maybe a 3-inch vine maple.
Yep.
In his backyard or out in the woods somewhere.
Basically one hitting it with his super assassin silver.
Dude, that thing is crazy. Oh, this is was that the titanium sword?
I don't.
Maybe that's a different video.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he was cutting with. Yeah, maybe the beta titanium one.
Testing Sanmai titanium katana.
Okay, so
yeah,
some other sort of edge, maybe.
No, well, so it's all titanium.
Right, have to be, huh?
Yeah. And Sam, oh gosh, what's his name? Sam Meta.
Yeah.
He's Mad Science Forge. Mecca. Sam Mecca.
Yep.
He's doing these wild titanium swords. That, from what I understand, are cutting performance-wise similar to like 1075, 1080 steels, which can get a pretty decent hardness.
Right.
But because it's titanium, it's insanely lightweight.
Yeah. Yeah, he's kind of the only one doing that, or was it?
Yeah. That's the titanium sword again.
Yeah.
And you can only pull out the pattern by anodizing it, right?
Yeah, heat or electroanodizing.
Yeah. This one looks more like a 2-inch, maybe a 2.5-inch vine maple.
Yeah. I think he.
Oh god! Just pop on one slice. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. All the way down.
Yeah. I love that we're just watching Instagram posts now.
Yeah.
Sorry, audio people. We'll get back to chatting in just
you gotta look. Haven't seen his videos.
Yeah, you got to check out Dan Keffler. He's, what is it? Yeah, it's just Dan_Keffler. Keffler. Keffler.
He's kind of the original, as far as I'm aware, cutting guy on the internet. Like, as far as the viral cutting videos, like, he was the first one I ever saw doing that.
Yeah, he was on the Jimmy Kimmel show for it.
Was he really? I don't know.
A few years back, yeah.
That's awesome. Oh yeah, I think I did see that because he was talking about the Blade Sports thing.
Yeah.
And Kimmel was a little
He's
little
doing his job.
about
He's
it.
making fun of it.
Yeah, yeah,
But Dan was great. I think Dan did a great job. I always like to see him on there.
yeah. He's amazing.
Yeah. Um. Okay, so we've been talking about Star Wars and the knives you make. Oh, I showed also a quick video. I slid up through your post, and there's a video actually of you grinding one of the axes on your extreme angle
Yeah,
um fixture. Let's see. Oh, here's a sword. Oh wow. I'll pull this one
yeah. It's
up.
great for axes since I mean the handle is not in line with the blade, which
Yeah.
kind of makes oh yeah, yeah.
This is a sword, right?
This rest is taking that idea, which the idea of that rest I got originally from Nick Wheeler. He was using it. He had built one to grind
Oh,
like swedges on fighters,
sure.
which is a pretty short bevel, you know, maybe
Right.
3/8 of an inch, which
Oh
is
yeah, I guess so.
pretty tricky to hold a flat grind at that shallow of a bevel.
Yes, for sure.
And so he had built one to do that. And I thought, you know, I could grind pretty much a whole knife with that. And so
Yeah,
I built a smaller one. And I thought,
right.
you know, if I can grind a knife on one, why not make a 4 foot long one that weighs
Yeah.
80 pounds? But I
Oh
keep
my gosh, it's not aluminum? I guess it might,
no, it gall too much.
yeah.
Yeah. It might not be 80 pounds, but it's close.
I mean, what is that, 3/8 plate?
A 1/4 inch.
A
And then I have
1/4 inch.
a backer on the back of it to add some more
Right.
rigidity.
Rigidity.
I mean, and
Yeah,
obviously it has major limitations in that you can only work with flat stock.
sure. Yeah, it looks like you're keying off the handle or off the
Yeah,
tang.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so as long as like you can do a full height grind as long as you have that flat area on the handle.
Well, and I guess you also have the flat of, like, the stock near the spine where the fuller is as
Right.
well.
Which eventually, depending on the blade, there's more, less, or none of that.
Right.
On these, they have a decent amount with that fuller.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's probably like fresh off a 120 belt.
Yeah. Ooh, looks good.
And that one's thicker.
Thick. It's a thick boy.
But again, taking that down to, you know, like 15 thousandths or something with the fullers, it like makes for a surprisingly light blade,
Oh, yeah, I believe it.
which is always a fun when someone picks up a blade that has such a massive spine.
Yeah, and they're like, "Whoa."
Yeah.
You're handle wrapping. So what's that handle wrapping style called?
Suka Ito.
And you have a really interesting, like, setup for doing your handle wrapping, like, with hinges, and it clamps the blade, and it flips the
Yeah.
blade back and forth from side to side. You've posted it on your Instagram if people wanna
Yeah, I
find
have
it.
some videos on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel that has like
Oh, nice, yeah.
if you go to my standard videos instead of the shorts, it's a little easier to look through. But yeah, so when I started doing the wraps, I think initially I Josh Mason, who's also another phenomenal knife maker, does a lot of Japanese style stuff. He was
Mm,
doing the wraps, and Matthew Gregory was doing the wraps, and obviously, you
right.
know, looking at like Phil Hartsfield stuff. But you know, and Pohan Lu and Bantang, all these people I'm remembering now.
Yeah.
But yeah, like most people would kind of clamp it flat to a table and kind of flip it over or hold it with one hand and wrap it with the other.
That sounds like a pain.
And part of my problem and part of like my, I guess, advantage is I'm always looking for like an easier way to do something.
Sure.
Like,
Why
and I'm
make
like,
it's already I say that all the time. I'm like, "It's already hard enough as it is.
yeah,
Why does it need to be
yeah,
harder?"
yeah. Which works out great when you're making tools and stuff, but when you're trying to
Yeah.
solve all of your kids and your wife's and everybody else's problem, I can make like, let's do that better. Like it
Yeah.
isn't always good, but like I'm kind of always looking. I'm like, why are you doing it that way? Like that seems like a pain in the ass to do it that way.
Sure.
And
Well, and it's like, especially when it's halfway through the, like a meaty, whatever, a step somewhere between the very beginning and the very end. Nobody's getting gold stars for a
no, no,
lot of
no.
those processes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like,
It's simply
just
just a
simplify it.
quality of life improvement. And I had watched, some traditional, and I don't think I'd seen anywhere. I think traditional Japanese swords, they're wrapping it and they would maybe flip it and clamp it and go back
Yeah.
to the other side. But I basically took, it's not a door hinge, but it's like a small hinge. But you could
Yes.
basically use like a door hinge off of a regular door. I
It
welded
looks
some
like you
plates.
got spot welded where all the
Right,
screws would go, right?
right, right,
So it's just
right.
like
So
the
you
plate.
could use just a regular door hinge. That would be wide enough
Yeah.
to clamp in a vise and to clamp a blade to. But I mean, it's super basic, and you
Yeah.
basically clamp it in a little. I think that's a little
I love it.
vise.
Yeah, I love it. It's so simple, but obviously it's super effective and it does
Oh
what you need
yeah,
it to do.
you keep both hands free, and I mean, and it honestly allows you to keep way more tension on the wrap. So the
Oh,
wrap
sure.
can be way tighter, way neater, and you're not like trying to hold a knife in place at the same time you're trying to hold on to two shoelaces that are trying to
Right.
unravel all the work you've spent doing. So yeah, huge. Anybody that wraps knife handles or wants to get into it, I highly recommend not trying to hold three things at once with two
Yeah.
hands.
You're not helping yourself, and
Yeah,
nobody's giving you any gold
right.
stars.
Yeah,
So,
yep. And it
simplify
makes
your
it way
life, son.
easier like if you're doing a Turk's knot to tie that
Oh,
on.
right.
I tie that in place as opposed to like getting it started and then sliding it on.
I was
So
sliding it on.
it's pretty tight the way I tie it on there, which is, it's nice to have the blade clamped, but not clamped rigid. You're able to flip it over and see the
Oh,
other
I
side.
get you.
Yeah.
I got that, axe grinding video with your
Yes.
extreme angle. So this is the
Yeah.
one you're probably using on a lot of your knives as well.
Yes. Yeah. That's a standard one I use. I don't know how
Yeah,
wide one is. Maybe like 14 inches or something.
sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah, on axes, it's kind of crucial that the bevel there is kind of halfway through. It'll be about twice that wide. But
Yeah.
it's really hard because your knuckles would be crashing into the belt, obviously, trying
Otherwise.
to hold any
Yeah.
leverage on the blade,
Right.
which
Yeah.
I'm sure you could make some sort of something else to do it, but this works pretty well.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Especially for the consistency of the width of that bevel and
Yeah.
the way it runs parallel to the edge. There are flat grinders out there or freehand grinders, not flat grinders, freehand
Yeah.
grinders that you could do that. It takes a lot of practice, and at the same time, again, like, simplify your life. Like,
Right.
you're not getting gold stars for freehand. Well, I think some people think freehand grinding is superior to using jigs or work rests or something like that. And it's just not true.
There
Again,
definitely used to be a stigma around that. And I think it was makers more than anybody putting that on other makers.
yeah.
Like as
Oh,
a
you
way to
don't
just,
freehand grind?
yeah, just, I mean, it was either you don't forge, or if you were just a stock removal maker, it's like, oh, you're using a work rest, or like, oh, you flat grind or try hollow grinding, or vice versa. It was always just kind of, and I think in the last maybe 5 years, I've seen a lot of that kind of get forgotten about, and kind of just,
Which is where it
I've
belongs.
kind of always been a product minded guy, as in like,
Right.
what's the end product? I want to make the best product that I can, and so I'm going to use processes that I can get the most consistent end product out of. And there's some stuff I do that is for the process or the aesthetic, like making San Mai or Damascus and stuff like that. Like
Sure.
that's a really satisfying process.
Yeah.
But as far as performance, I've found a steel that I'm really happy with. That's like a steel and processes, and anymore, people are happy with, the performance and the end product, and they're not concerned about any tools that I use or didn't use or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the nice thing about the custom world. Like, if you're looking for a completely handmade, hand filed, forged on the floor, whatever, like there's
Sharpened
definitely,
on the concrete.
yeah. I mean, I think that's incredibly cool. The
Yeah.
makers that do that, it's just a different thing. Like,
Yeah.
I think going back to kind of the business aspect of knife making, like realizing not everybody is your customer is really a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, instead of chasing everybody as a potential customer, just find who your customer is. Like, my
Right.
customers like a certain style of knife, and they don't care the tools and different stuff. My phone, I swear. It must be
Did
after
flip
about
on you again.
45 minutes. It says you can't be sideways anymore. Um, but yeah, I can't be all things to all customers. Like,
Right.
and trying to be that, I think, is kind of a hole some makers dig for themselves that isn't
Yeah.
necessary. But
Is that I feel like you said that to me recently, like when I was
probably,
down visiting.
probably the
Yeah.
last time we talked. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was oh, yeah, we stayed up late Saturday night and we were chatting, and, I think that's when it came up, and I was like, "Oh, God," it, like, hit me like a brick wall, and it's like it's so simple, and it seems
Yeah.
so obvious, but at the same time, like, it's something I haven't really taken into consideration, but it is the
Right.
truth. Like, even in other businesses, like, the restaurants that are trying to like, if a restaurant tried to make all the different varieties of food, from around the world,
Yeah.
essentially trying to appeal to everybody, that would not be a great restaurant
No, it's
because
a terrible
they
business model.
they're not specializing in anything particular,
Yeah.
so everything's probably kind of blah, versus
Yeah.
somebody who specializes in a
Buffets, for
very
example.
narrow thing. Yeah, yeah, exactly, buffets. Yeah, versus, like, a tiny little hole in the wall, like, ramen shop.
Yeah.
That's all they do,
Right.
and they're gonna be so good because that's where they're focusing their energy and their efforts at. And
A
they don't
hundred.
need to be they don't need all the customers in the world.
Right.
They need to do what they're doing is trying to create something quality enough that they have enough people, or more than I probably ideally more than enough people. But
Right.
anyways, people coming through, but they
Right.
don't need the same people coming back day after day after day.
Yeah.
If they have enough quality and appeal, people are gonna they'll come back every maybe once or twice a month or something like
Right.
that,
And,
and
and
but
you don't
and
have to you don't have to worry about the guy coming in asking for a hamburger. Like,
yeah,
oh man, we should make hamburgers, or like stressing
yeah.
about
This is a
stressing
ramen
about
shop.
what he thinks about your business. Like, I make ramen. Like, I don't make hamburgers. Like,
I've been to places that are like they're like Chinese restaurants with, like, very authentic food, and they don't have, like, a Caesar salad or a burger on the menu, and people are
yeah.
like, "Can I just get a burger?" And they're like, "Sorry, we don't sell," and they're like, "You don't sell a burger here?" It's like, "No, because we make Szechuan food.
Right.
You're here ideally for Szechuan food.
Right.
If you want a burger, Burger King's around the corner."
Yeah. There's a seat for every butt, and this is not it for you. So, like,
Yeah. No, but
yeah.
it's a really good, and I actually I I what is it? My local post office. There's a woman there that does this really incredible cross stitching. Like, she'll take a thread of cross stitching thread and she'll split them out into individual threads.
Right.
And she does these it's like super intense, like gradient coloring and fading and shadowing and shading.
Hmm.
She's incredibly talented. And she's like, how do you figure out your price and how do you, how do you find your people? I sorry, I'm stuttering right now. The first thing I said to her is basically what you said to me is I because she was asking me how I do that for my knives, and I was like, I have to realize that I'm not trying to sell my work to everybody.
Right.
It's one, it's just not possible. But two, it's if you try to appeal to too broad of an audience,
Right.
like I have a lot of people following on Instagram, but how many of those people, one, are actually like super interested in my work to the point where they're interested in buying? And then secondly, like how many of those people are in the position to actually afford the work?
Right.
And that narrows it down pretty dang
Oh yeah.
quickly
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
a handful of people that are actually following me who are in that position to do that. And I'm thankful for them. Um, and so I think, but yeah, that is definitely something that's been bouncing around in my head is like, you got to keep it in perspective. It's because it's just
Right.
not realistic to think I need to appease or appeal to everybody. You don't. You
Especially if you're taking orders. Like
right.
if you're someone who takes orders and you're trying to kind of do all these different things, like that's where it gets really tricky and complicated. Like
Yeah.
trying to fill every single request someone has because you're
Right.
feeling kind of feast or famine. I need this
Yeah.
to, pay bills, whatever. I mean, and like it made me so much more comfortable like recommending other knife makers.
Oh yeah.
I have no problem now like turning someone down for something like no, but this guy does take orders or whatever his stuff is really what you're after, even if it's close to what I do, but
Sure.
not what I'm interested in doing. I'm like, go see this guy. He's what you want. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that helps everybody. It helps me out because I'm not feeling the pressure to
Right.
try and do something either I'm not interested in or not comfortable doing or just bored with, whatever. But it's someone else's bread and butter. And like, if you can help someone else out by spreading that around, like that's good for everybody.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, how are you doing on time?
I'm good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to also talk to you about so you got your start doing a lot of direct sales, but you've branched off into um the titanium spatulas. How
Yeah.
did that start? Can you tell me about that?
I think I'm trying to remember. I think the first time I got interested in any kind of titanium was doing, I thought that maybe I'd be a folder maker there for about 10 minutes.
Okay.
And so I
Yeah.
needed some titanium because I didn't want to use inferior stainless or whatever. Like,
Mhm.
and so I got some titanium. I think I got like a used lot of titanium off of eBay or used. It's most titanium's surplus, so that's a funny way to say it. But there's like a big lot of miscellaneous titanium off of eBay, and I made like a little slip joint I kind of invented a mechanism that I never used again. But it was
Oh,
kind of like a slip joint, but with a way oversized ball detent. There's
okay.
actually a video of it on my YouTube.
Okay.
Probably my most watched video on YouTube ever, actually, for some weird
Oh,
reason.
really? It's because it's
Um,
an invention. People are like,
yeah,
"Oh my gosh, I've never seen that before."
yeah. So I got some titanium and I made that, and I had all these other miscellaneous pieces of titanium.
Yeah.
I think the first, cutlery type thing I made out of it was like a little spoon for one of my kids, which was pretty crude. Um, but it was fun. I'm like, if, a spoon is cool, a titanium spoon is way cooler, right?
Of course. Way cooler.
Um, and then, I mean, made a spoon, and then I made a giant spatula, like a barbecue spatula, out of some
Mhm.
titanium. And as I do, if it's worth doing one thing, it's worth like dedicating everything to, like as a hobby, So I made one spatula, then you make one spatula and you want to make another one.
Of course.
And it's like everything could be a product in my mind, like, and so I'm trying to remember. I think my first spatula was a model I still sell, just kind of like that middle one there, but a full
Right.
size one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a standard kitchen size spatula.
Oh, that's still a little mini, huh?
Yeah. And so, I started adding those. I had barely a website at the time that I just had pictures of and email me, if you
Yeah.
want to buy something kind of deal. This was probably, I want to say 2016.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm trying to remember how I got involved with Abe at Eating Tools. I don't remember if I found him or he found me.
Okay.
But yeah, pretty early on in the titanium journey, we got together. And it was something that I want to say there was a maker making titanium spatulas, but he hadn't been making them for a few years. And I hadn't actually seen them until Abe had shown them to me. Can't remember his name. It was Draper, whatever his first name is.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know who that is.
Anyway,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Oh, these are spatulas." I think he had sold a few of them, but the guy wasn't making them anymore. And he's like, "I see the stuff you're making," and so it started with me, that first model.
Yeah.
So on the left side of the screen there, if you go up, the purple and gold ones, up one more, yeah, those. So that one on the far left was kind of my original model.
Yeah.
And it was we got together and he was interested in selling them, and so did one, and then I did a batch of them, maybe 10 of them or something.
Sure.
And it just started with that one model and basically grew from there. I think the fish spatula in the middle there was probably the second or third one that
Okay.
I signed. And again, like with all my stuff, very function first designs. Like
Sure.
I wanted them to be simple and durable. But yeah, there's a world of spatulas out there. So it was pretty easy kind of like knives, like there's all kinds of designs you can go with. And so it was a pretty easy, quick growth of designs added to the lineup.
Right.
From large offsets to small offsets to, grill spatulas and
Yeah, I love this
wok
set
spatulas.
actually right here. Like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
Standard
Yeah.
spatula, fish spatula, small offset.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yep. And then, I think then I started getting into making more like spoons and forks
Right.
and forks and that kind of stuff as well for my website and for him. Just kind of a natural addition to the brand, if you want to call it that. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, and then eventually I got into the ramen spoon,
Yeah.
which is shown there. I always thought that would be super cool, and you could get like Snow Peak and other brand like sporks and spoons and kinds of all made in China, like really basic stuff. But I didn't ever see anybody that had made a titanium ramen spoon,
Right.
and so to get it like right, you can't really hand hammer that to shape. It's too small to dish and form
Sure.
easily. You could do it if it was copper or steel, maybe,
Mhm.
but being titanium and being so thin, it doesn't hold heat very easily. And so I had to come up with a way to form it. And I ended up fabricating some dies that I
Yeah.
press it to shape all in one hit. So that was kind of a
Are you
cool
doing it hot, or are you cold forming
hot.
it?
Yeah. You can form like my ladles. Some of the ladles I can form cold because
Okay,
there's no sharp angles and
sure.
fairly shallow radius. But with those, I have to do it hot, and because they're so thin and titanium doesn't absorb heat really readily, you have to be
Sure.
quick forge to press, and so to get it right, it has to be a pretty quick process.
Right. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's a good shot.
Yeah. Pretty slick. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like them.
yeah,
One, it's a what I really like about it is, like, so, for people who are only listening, I got his page pulled up, and he does a lot of anodizing work, um, to add, I guess, design and character to
yeah,
these things that would just look like metal, and it's so that they're different, that they're not just a standard metal until, like, they have all these wild colors and patterns on them, and it's like,
right.
"Wait a second, how does that work?" And it's like, "Oh, that's because they're titanium."
Yeah, I think that's kind of a way other industries have distinguished titanium products in the past, like
Yeah,
especially like the automotive industry. Like if it was titanium, it had a cool gradient color on it.
right.
So people knew it wasn't aluminum or stainless necessarily. So yeah, that was a good way to make something visually not only stand out, I mean, you're adding a cool design to it, but it visually made it stand out like, oh, that's different. That's not
Yeah.
just a stainless spatula that I've seen, thousands of.
I still love this peony pattern.
Yeah,
I think it's the first one that you have posted. It's still my
yeah,
favorite out of all of them.
yeah, it's super
It's
fun.
pretty good. I love it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and a
I
lot of
really like those kinda
people,
natural
like if
floral
you don't
qualities.
know how, like if you're watching this on
Oh, yeah.
video, like there's a lot of wild, I can do basically any kind of pattern or graphic or color variant. And how I'm doing most of those is with electroanodizing, which titanium is a reactive metal. There's a couple reactive metals like zirconium and niobium and titanium, and there might be one or
There's aluminum to some
no.
of.
So you
Oh,
can
okay.
you can anodize or aluminum, but it's a totally different process, and it's oftentimes
Oh, interesting.
confused. So aluminum, it's actually a
Okay.
plating. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
the same word, but you're actually putting, I think it's kind of a plastic like coating on the aluminum. So
Oh,
with the
interesting.
titanium, which so obviously wouldn't be good for food, you know,
No,
wears off.
that sounds terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
But with the titanium, all you're doing is creating an oxide layer. Like you
Right.
get when you heat steel or stainless, you get
Sure.
an oxide layer that is just the base metal.
Right.
So, but with titanium, unlike those other metals, it's actually an extremely durable oxide.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess
And
so. Because I was cooking with them, and,
yeah,
like, they had the pattern was still there, and I think those were probably at least a few years old.
oh yeah. I have ones in my kitchen that are probably 7 years old,
Oh, wow.
and
Yeah,
the color is super color fast. But
that's
yeah, with
cool.
reactive metals, essentially either with heat, which is I did a little bit of heat initially, but when you're working with such thin metal,
Oh,
like
yeah, it's hard to
020,
control.
030 blades on these spatulas, like it tends to warp a lot.
Yeah,
So I quickly transitioned to electroanodizing, which basically means I can dial in the color I want literally with a dial with a electrolysis type of setup.
sure. God, the
But to get the
pink on this
patterns,
is
I use my fiber laser
right,
and basically remove the color, polish it in certain areas, and then go back and at a lower voltage, I can reanodize it. That was a fun one.
right,
Those were that's kind of three a three times baked process there, where it's
right.
anodize laser, anodize laser, anodize laser. to
Yeah.
get the multiple high contrast colors.
All right. So on the purple one, the last round is lasering off what are these kind of titanium colored spaces, right?
Yeah, so let's like
Yeah.
the one in the middle, like the pink one's a good example. So with anodizing, you can, if you remove the anodizing in certain places, as long as when you go back to anodize it again, you
Yep.
do not go above the previous voltage.
Yep.
So say that pink color is somewhere in the 70 volts range. I would go
Hmm.
back and laser off one of those camo patterns. So like let's see, the light blue, I would
Yeah.
laser that and then go back to anodize the light blue, which is like 35 volts, which would not affect the pink color being 70 volts.
Right.
And then I would go back and laser it again where the dark blue portion is and anodize it at like 25 volts, which doesn't
Right.
affect either of the higher voltages.
Oh, that's so interesting that the pink is the highest voltage on
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. What is the gradient? Like when you're going through the colors, what does it start? Does it start like steel usually is like a straw yellow to a
Yeah.
brown to a purple to a blue to a silver blue? Does it follow that same kind of gradient or
It is up through, man, I'm trying to think of what steel. It would kind of go silver, blue, and then start to,
and then it would start again,
yeah.
kind of.
Yeah. So with titanium, it's basically the same initially. You kind of
Okay.
start straw to bronze to kind of like a mix of, kind of like a plum color, and then purple,
Yeah.
and then dark blue to light blue. And then with titanium, from light blue, it goes to like a pale green to a yellow green to a yellow
Oh, whoa.
into peach, pink, and then back to like a lavender color.
Hmm.
So like
Interesting.
it never really crosses the same color twice, but they're like dark purple's really low, like 20 volts, and
Okay.
then that bright pink,
Yeah.
kind of purplish you can get like a lavender color up in like the 75-volt
And
range.
lavender, you mean like a pale purple?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
lavender maybe magenta would be a better.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm just trying to
Look at us talking for.
lilac? Ooh.
Who would have seen it? Maybe lilac,
Yeah.
fuchsia, perhaps, to the aficionado.
Okay.
But yeah, then you start getting like green and stuff, which you can't really get on other. You get like a cool kind of mother of pearl between like purple and green, which is one of my favorite colors to do.
Sure.
Like flashes of purple and green, and then it
Oh,
transitions
interesting.
into green. Green is really the highest voltage, nice looking color you can get. Above that, it kind of starts turning into like a mottled, really pale green, almost red, but it's not consistent, doesn't look very good. So
I gotcha.
kind of what people consider like a toxic green color is kind of the peak of
I gotcha.
nice looking titanium
And
anodizing.
and what voltage is that at?
Depending on your setup, but around 100, 105
Mhm.
volts. Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Uh, um, what was I gonna say? Oh, so this I have very limited experience with anodizing setups. Tom Buckner lives locally
Mm-hmm.
down here in Olympia, and or I guess up here in Olympia, and he has shown me his setup, but it's basically like just a little tank that holds a particular kind of solution, or maybe
Yeah.
it's water. I don't know what, and
Yeah,
then
you
he's
want
running the current
distilled
through it.
water. Distilled
Yeah,
water and then some sort of electrolyte. I
electrolyte.
just use borax, like mule
Oh,
team borax.
yeah,
But yeah, that's all you need for the liquid, and then it's basically a cathode anode. You have your
yeah.
positive and negative, and Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And so it just for the spatulas or whatever you're doing, it just has to be a large enough container
Right.
to hold that and enough solution to completely submerge it, right?
Right. And a large enough, I always forget which one's the cathode and which one's the anode, but if you have like a spatula blade, you want ideally way more surface area of the cathode. Someone knows this, and I should know this. One of them is cathode, one of them is your anode,
Yeah.
and you really want it to be bigger than the part you're trying to anodize. Um, yeah, and it needs
Man.
to be also titanium, I believe. You definitely don't want any like steel or anything else submersed. There's actually a lot of good information if anybody wants to get into anodizing titanium.
Interesting. Yeah. This
And I do
is
have a few videos sprinkled in
on
showing
your
me
YouTube.
do it, and there's a lot of
Oh, on your Instagram.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any on YouTube. Probably
Okay.
some on there, but
Trade secrets. You just gave away some serious secrets, man.
no.
Um,
The
so
only secrets I have are ones that were given to me as a secret and someone told me not to share. If it's something I've come up with, I don't really have any secrets. So
I gotcha. To go back to working with like eating like Abe over at Eating
yeah.
Tools, are there other retailers that you work with? And how
Yeah,
sorry, just real quick.
not a lot.
Okay.
He's probably the biggest one I work with, and it's
Yeah.
primarily with the spatula stuff.
Yeah.
Occasionally, I'll send him some kitchen knives. I've worked with a few other retailers sporadically. Epicurean Edge, I've sent them some kitchen knives and different
Yeah.
stuff. So, Blade Gallery, and then Arizona Custom Knives.
Oh yeah.
Um, they'll buy a few knives from me here and there, and they're actually, if you want to see like a large gallery of my knives going back a long ways, kind of all in one place, they're pretty good for most makers. If you're a maker, or if a maker has sold through them, it's kind of a cool library because they never delete any old stuff they've sold. So you
Mm.
can go on there and type in my name or whatever and scroll back through all the sold knives. And it's kind
Oh
of a
wow.
cool progression of knives that I've made, at least as long as I've been selling to them.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and I've worked with a couple other, but really Eating Tools and probably Arizona Custom Knives are the two that I've worked with consistently. And yeah, and Abe has been great. It's been amazing to Abe at Eating Tools. It's been great to grow the spatula idea into pretty much a business of its own.
Right.
Like it would have been just a few I made here and there for myself and sold a couple, to people that were interested. But because he was really interested in that, and because he's so good at growing ideas like that, and
Sure.
he has way more reach into the culinary world than I do. Like, I'm peripherally interested in that. I think it's cool,
Yeah.
but I can only wear so many hats, and like I just don't have the time to
Yeah.
dive down that as much as I would like to. And
Sure.
so being able, for him to kind of focus on that for me, I mean, I think I'd like to say it's helped his business out quite a bit. We've
Hmm.
grown that together kind of. And I mean, he has a whole page on his website called Thai Spats, with just spatulas and, cutlery type stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it's been really cool to be able to explore that avenue that really in some ways has a lot to do with knives, in a kitchen. Like, you got pots and pans and knives, and then cooking utensils, like they're all hand in hand.
Hmm.
Um, so it's been cool to be able to kind of get into that world more, even though I don't do a lot of kitchen knives. But being able to be involved in that, through Eating Tools,
Yeah.
and getting them into the hands of, some pretty cool people that, I admire in the cooking world has been fun to see, and getting some notoriety for them and stuff that, I probably haven't got with the knives necessarily, because that's a little bit more niche, the types
Sure.
of knives I make. But yeah, it's been super cool, and I know he's done that with knives for a lot of other makers and stuff, and other,
Yeah.
people making really small, pots and pans, and, napkin holders and chopsticks, and like all of these things that would be really hard as a maker to reach a wide audience with,
Yeah.
having them kind of all together in one place under this like eating tools brand and roof kind of makes it a one-stop shop for that handmade kitchen accessory that doesn't really exist anywhere else that I've seen, at least not in the US. I mean,
Hmm.
a lot of knife houses focus on factory type stuff, and then they'll sprinkle in some custom kitchen knives, but having all those cool handmade products all in one place is like, I think it kind of brings everybody up that's involved with that. That's been my
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, and you were, was it, you were featured in Oprah magazine, and then at
Yeah.
the top of your Instagram on the spatula page, you got Chef Andrew Zimmern
Yeah. Yeah.
holding one of your spatulas.
Yeah. And he, again, he just, I mean, he got that organically through finding it on eating tools, and
Yeah.
he's just posted about it a couple times, which is super cool. I mean,
Right.
I've never met him personally. I know you have, but I mean, he seems like a really cool guy, and definitely someone I've looked up to in the chef world.
Right.
Uh, So
Yeah, he's a good dude.
getting that real world, someone saying like, yeah, it's actually as good a tool as, you say it is, and it looks great. Like it's kind of a cool
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
No, super good. Um, do you see, I guess what how have you found it navigating working with a retailer, since you've done so much work building your brand, I guess to get into the marketing kind of talk, brand building and marketing, you've done such kind of like grassroots growth through direct interaction with people through forums. You're really great about posting super consistently on your Instagram. It's actually quite impressive, and if anybody wants to get better at posting, just watch what Ben's doing. He does a great job being very consistent. It took me a long time to get back to 2020 versus my Instagram. You go down like 20 posts and it's like boom, 2020 right there. I
Right.
had to go through hundreds of years. Um, but it's good because I think it creates visibility. But how is it? Yeah, how's it been? I guess I mean you talked about it a little bit, but just because it's so different from what you've done, and do you see that being a relationship that you continue to carry on, or do you have ideas of other products or other retailers you might try to work with or want to work with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always open to working with new retailers, on knives, or
Yeah.
the spatulas, especially. That's a little bit easier for me to grow and, make multiples of something than the knives that are a little bit more intense. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm always open to adding new retailers, and I've had some retailers. I think Modern Cooking, which is in
Oh yeah.
Belgium or Germany, Belgium maybe.
I can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Over there, somewhere in Europe.
So, I've worked with them a bit. I've worked with New West Knife Works, which they have some
Hmm.
cool vacation spot hubs, selling spatulas and stuff. But yeah, I mean, the spatulas for sure, a majority of that goes through a retailer, but my knives and stuff have always been kind of just what I've put out. It started on forums, so just posting in
Hmm.
sales sections of forums.
Yeah.
Like that was before Instagram, which I could look back and see when I started Instagram. I don't remember. Um, but before Instagram, that was I relied on that for pretty much all my sales. I think a lot of makers did. It was forums, and then knife shows was, or if you were cool enough to have an ad in Blade magazine or
Oh
something,
boy.
someone
Yeah.
could write you a letter to get a catalog a little bit before I started making. But yeah, I mean, fortunately you're able to, but unfortunately, like, if you're not visible by posting frequently, you're kind of forgotten about quickly.
Yeah.
So you have to do something to remind people that you exist. Otherwise, there's
Mhm.
somebody else, trying to get that visibility.
Sure.
Um, and I mean, it's definitely work. I'll go through spells where I'm like, I haven't posted at all for a week and a half, and like,
Mm.
people aren't seeing the post that I made a week and a half ago. Like, that doesn't, as Instagram, for example, like, that's not showing up to them in their feed anymore.
Right.
So they're not seeing, I don't do paid ads.
No.
I've really haven't done any. I think I've tried it once or twice, and just for really short periods of time, and it just was not very successful. So pretty much all the growth has just been from grinding out, making a post, ideally every day, which I'm not good at, but, at least a
Yeah.
couple times a week, just to, it might be as simple as showing a
Woo.
work in progress on your bench, or
Yeah.
finished product. And I'm not great at doing like fully produced videos with multiple scenes. Those are
Sure.
definitely more interesting, and you can get more visibility sometimes having those kinds of videos. But even
Yeah.
just something super simple, showing what you're working on to the people that follow you, like, goes a long ways. Like, there's a reason companies do commercials that
Right.
hit you in the face between shows. And there's a reason you get an email from every company you've ever put an email into on their website. Like, looking at that, I mean, I don't have a marketing strategy guy, but just like, oh, those companies are visible.
Yeah.
Nike, I mean, like, Nike or something is one of the biggest companies in the world, and yet you still see advertising from them
Oh
on
yeah.
Instagram, on
Sponsorships. Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
commercials and like, they have to try and stay visible. So in my head, like, that must be a good move, because there's probably a guy they're paying millions of dollars that tells them to do that. So, like, if
Yeah.
staying visible
No,
is
that's a
important,
fair point.
yeah, if staying visible is important to a company that big, like, how much more is it important for someone who's
Teeny tiny.
making knives in their garage and
Dude, that is such a great point, and that's a point that I don't think I've ever heard, but it makes perfect sense that if a company that size is still working to maintain visibility, which kind of
yeah,
translates to relevancy,
right,
um, which also is sometimes referred to as kind of being top of mind. So when somebody's thinking about a shoe and they've seen, whether it's conscious or subconsciously, seen people wearing Nike shoes in a TV show or a movie or advertisement or a magazine, or a commercial and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's going to be one of the things they might think of. I might think of Nike as a tennis shoe, even though
right,
I can't wear Nikes. My feet are too wide, so Nikes
yeah,
are too small for me. But when I think of tennis shoes, Nike's probably one of the first brands I think
right,
of.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
It's
mean, it
not
was the
Saucony,
first
it's not
brand
a
that came to
Via.
mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, but
yeah,
that's a really good point. And I think, yeah, maintaining, yeah, that visibility is kind of, like I said, it's maintaining a sense of relevancy, and to kind of just like, not everybody sees every post you make.
Oh,
So you're not
100%.
even necessarily hitting the same people multiple times. You're
No.
probably hitting some of them, but you're probably actually hitting different aspects of your audience through various posts. So a lot of people are like, I had one friend, he's like, yeah, if you post too many times in one day, people get mad. I'm like, you're catering to a very tiny number of people who might be seeing your posts every time that you post.
Right.
But you have, if even if you had 5,000 followers, not all 5,000, it's probably actually just a few hundred that see the post
A hun-
initially.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, or even less, honestly. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I
yeah,
think on average, 1%, like if I look at video views of the followers I have versus the views that I'm given, which is a whole nother Instagram meta rabbit hole
yeah,
of not giving visibility to knife makers, especially over the last year with our amazing AI overlords, like
yes.
censoring out knives because I don't know, they're dangerous or something. Like, but yeah, I mean, it's
Weapons,
probably
obviously.
1% on average that sees my posts
Yeah,
out of however many followers I have.
yeah,
And I mean, and kind of on a different but similar subject, like making the same knife more than once or a similar knife. I used to be in a mindset of like, oh, I've made that already. I've got to make something new so someone's interested in it. But you have a whole bunch of people, and odds are, if you made that knife that someone likes, there's probably someone else that would have liked it too. Like,
that one knife, you probably have potentially hundreds.
right. Yeah.
Not that you
It's
wanna
kind
make that
of,
knife hundreds of times over, but if you
right.
make it again, you should be able to move it just fine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. As an artist or whatever you call yourself, you like want to move on to the next thing, but
Sure.
sometimes being okay, at least revisiting that design or that thing, down the road
Yeah,
is not only efficient, but, important to kind of reach some of those customers that you've built a base of.
yeah, yeah. Where do you feel like you see your business going? Like, say, even in the next 5 years, do you have things in the works that you're kinda moving and shaking on and hopefully kind of get some things going and changing things up? Or are you feeling really comfortable with where you're at and just kinda continuing kind of your continuous steady growth? Because I think it's really cool that you've branched out kind of like in a very juxtaposition kind of way from these like hard use EDC kind of Japanese style tough boy knives, whatever you called them,
Right.
to like these super flexible fish spatulas and spatulas of all different kinds
Right.
and kitchen utensils. They're kind of like almost opposites on the
Right.
spectrum of knives, and so um yeah, it's really interesting, to see that both of them are doing so well. Yeah, what kind of, or if you wanna share, you don't have to share, but, just like what, or kinda in general, what do you see for yourself in the next 5, maybe 10 years if you can project that far out?
It's funny because I just saw a meme yesterday, and I think it was like Walton Goggins or something, just like sitting there, and it's like me when someone's talking about their thought out business plan and all of these things, and it's like just flying by the seat of my pants and the whimsy that hits me from day. And I'm like, didn't really think about it, but that kind of rings true. Like
Sure, sure.
a lot of
That's
my
fair too.
like most of the stuff that is my full-time stuff now, spatulas and Japanese style knives, like
Yeah,
was a fun idea that was I liked, but turned out to be sellable.
yeah,
Like, and not to break, I mean, a lot of people want to think of this as just art, but if you want to do it as a business,
mm,
you really got to think about like, is this a product that people want?
right,
And
yeah,
I don't generally plan stuff out necessarily long term like that. Most of my stuff is an idea that something like that would be cool. I mean, it's pretty basic, like little kid stuff. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Like to make, like whether it's titanium pry bars or something, or
Right.
and and a lot of times I'll do like pry bars, for example. Like I've forged, probably 3 dozen titanium pry bars, or maybe more than that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool and it's fun, but there's not a full-time market for it.
So
So
you're not
it's
gonna just turn into a pry bar production plant?
right, and I wouldn't want to. Grinding titanium really sucks. But I mean, a lot of stuff I do is like, oh, I made a batch of that. Excuse me. And it's like the market in total was 6 pieces.
Okay.
Like, and it doesn't seem to be any more interest in said product beyond that that's sustainable to continue pursuing that idea.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't really think of myself as an inventor because most of the stuff is not completely original ideas, but
I gotcha.
I'm kind of just throwing stuff at the wall that I think is cool. And if
Yeah.
it sticks and has traction, it might turn into like a business idea. And I mean, I do like titanium jewelry and spatulas
Right.
and
The
pry bars.
titanium jewelry is pretty cool. Like I just pulled up a picture
Yeah.
of his Super Mario pry bar.
Yeah. That was for my son.
Nice.
So, I mean, these are things that are just like fun artistic ideas
Yeah.
that either turn out to be a product that is sellable to a lot of people or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm always, and a lot of times, like a tool that I get, like a forging press or a CNC router or a laser, like my laser engraver was probably one of the biggest transitional things I got that I didn't plan for. I got it because I hated using acid etch to mark my maker's
Sure.
mark. And I finally got to a point I'm like, I can afford this. And I hate using the acid etch and having to redo knives because it didn't come out quite right.
Right.
And then it turned into like using it to do this line of titanium spatulas. There was kind of an integral part, I think, in growing that artistically into a product of its own
Right.
that I couldn't really have accounted for when I got it.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, and a lot of tools that I have got, you kind of, as a maker, you get a tool for one thing, and then because you own it, figure out other things to do with it. I mean, because you have it, but also to pay for it. Like
Right.
using a little forging press I got from Coal Iron Works to press the rivets on the spatulas. Like I didn't really see that as what I got it for, but turns out it makes that a lot more efficient and I can make them easier and have a higher quality product because of that.
Right. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, man. Well, I'm gonna let you get back to your day. I appreciate you taking
Yeah.
time to talk with me. I actually feel like we could go longer for sure, but
Yeah.
we got other things I got going on today, and I know you got plenty going on, so we'll
Oh
just have to
yeah.
have you come back on.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but yeah, I really admire your work, and I have admired the levels of success that you've found for yourself through what I think is a much more sustainable approach. Where I think, like
Yeah.
yours, where a lot of people are trying to race to be famous, basically.
Right.
Um, but for a business to be successful, for a maker to be successful, they gotta
Yeah.
they gotta approach it from a more slow growth kind of approach
Right.
in regards of thinking about the longevity and sustainability of that business, because you don't want to be a flash in the pan. And I think you've done a good job building your audience, your reputation, desirability for your work, yeah, connecting with your collectors, and I think that's really cool. And I think there's a lot of lessons that people could take from what you've shared about your experience, as well as
Yeah.
just following you on Instagram as well. And really quick, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, Instagram is probably where I post the most. I also post on Facebook for people that still use that. And
Old folks.
basically, I make videos for Instagram and repost them to YouTube and Facebook. But
I
I
gotcha.
also have a website, brtbladeworks.com, and people can find everything there and different links to stuff. But yeah.
Sweet. Perfect.
Cool,
And I
man.
want to thank, yeah, I want to thank our super sponsors again for from the Patreon. Again, if you want to become a member of the Patreon, be part of these live conversations, ask questions of these very talented artisans, you can join at the illuminated individual level or higher, and you will be part of these live chats. Our super sponsors this month are Lawrence Lake of Maritime Knife Supply on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, as well as maritimeknifesupply.com. Gabe Fletcher of Anchorage Forge, Anchorage Brewing, and Anchorage Forge on Instagram. Josh Weston, who is Josh A. Weston, as well as at Dragon Forge EXP for the Dragon Forge experience on Instagram. Russell Tinsley, who is at Can't Make Knives, as well as at Oozle Finch Beers on Instagram. And Dan Hubbs, who is on Instagram and Facebook at 66 Mountain Knives. Thank you guys for being part of the conversation and being here and making these conversations a reality. And thank you to our wonderful guest, Ben, for being on here and hanging out with us and sharing his story and his knowledge and wisdom. I think there are a lot of great takeaways in this conversation. I know I've got a few for sure. Say that again.
But thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm very thankful for your time. All right.